Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
He'll play it along near side Barkov. Barkov zips it rink wide of lane. Reinhardt's the front of the net. A shot, he scores! Sam Reinhardt, the overtime winner, and it only took 15 seconds. The Panthers win it 4-3 in overtime.
Lillard's into the front court. Drives on Durant, puts up the floater, rips around and drops. Damian Lillard delivers again. He's got 15 of their last 17 now. Gillespie back out on top to Nikola Jokic. Jokic guarded by Jackson Davis, split the defenders, little floaters up and in. 29 for Nikola Jokic.
Anunoby down the base. OG cleared for takeoff in Big D. 106.95. Two hands for safety.
Embiid has it. He'll shoot for three. That's up and good. All that on one play. JoJo triple. Sixers by 4. 23 for Embiid.
It's on the 4-minute mark. It is out there. Step back fires. An angle right three over the end. It's nothing but net. Chichinga's under money ball. Timeout Cleveland.
Good morning. Welcome in on a Thursday.
What up?
That's Andrew Rogers. I'm Ravi Lulla. Not like when I was signing off yesterday and I felt like I was Andrew Rogers.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Yeah, I need my teleprompter. Where is it? Welcome in to Hurrdat Sports Radio. We are live from the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, live on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities. You can find us on Twitter and YouTube as well. We've got a jam-packed show for you today. We're getting, we got the pretty heavy football Fridays that we do. We're kind of getting a little heavy on the pre-football Thursdays as well.
When not much happens on a Wednesday night outside of Husker volleyball,
it's true. Yeah,
you kind of get to that.
Well, it was a little bit of a slow night last night.
For Husker volleyball too.
Yeah, they came out a little sluggish. It seemed like dropped a set to Northwestern.
Not only that first set went into extras.
I would say, yeah, it was a struggle the whole time. It seemed like, and so I don't really know what to make of that. You have those nights throughout the year, and obviously they came out on top still, and
it was still 3-1, so you can't knock them too much. Sometimes in volleyball, I just wonder if it's kind of just luck, and I say that in like the most respectful term, because when you are drawing up your play, right? You have your bump, set, kill, right? Well, like when you're at the net against these ladies from Nebraska who are 6'4", 6'5", I don't even know how tall they actually are, but when they jump, they take up a bunch of the net whenever you're trying to have a kill attempt, and it just seemed like Northwestern was finding the window. Like squeezing it through the arms or just getting it off of Becca Alex's hands and off to the side or Andy Johnson. There were just moments where the ball would just go Northwestern's way over Nebraska's way. And I think that's why it made it so close early on in that match until Nebraska started getting into rhythm. And even when they did get into rhythm in that second set, they were up like 4 or 5 points. Northwestern would just come right back and rally together some points. So it was I don't think it's like, hey, this is a critical error, and Nebraska needs to really assess this week. But it does go to show that, hey, when things don't go right, even a team that's 11-13 can be competitive against you.
Yeah, well, and it's I did think they looked a little sluggish coming out, so I think that was part of it. I do think you're right with the luck is probably the right term for it. Kind of
it's not really skill, right? If you really think about it. So a lot of times, they're just going up and they're hitting it as hard as they can. Now, the best of the best can direct the ball, so that's the skill there. But if I'm Northwestern, I'm just trying to get it past Nebraska's front line.
Yeah.
So the goal is to just hit it as hard as I can, maybe get a lucky bounce, goes out of bounds, boom, I get the point.
So the way that I kind of think about it, there's two sort of analogies that came to my mind immediately. One, I think, is probably more similar, but I think the other one actually makes more sense. So I'll give you both here. You know how when you're at the line of scrimmage and a quarterback's throwing the ball and you've got hands everywhere, I think sometimes it's almost the reverse of it. Like sometimes guys get their hands up and it's just luck that they knock the ball down, right? The timing's a little bit different. The arm angle's a little bit different, whatever. It's sort of the reverse of that in volleyball where it's missing the arms is sometimes the luck. I mean, obviously you're trying to find windows in both scenarios, right? And sometimes whether you do or not is a little bit of a variable that you can't control. The other one is where I think that's closer to more pure luck is baseball, right? Like you get those seeing eye singles and things like that. Like you can smoke a ball right at a guy, you get nothing for it, right? And then you've got a Luis Gonzalez blooper over shortstop because the infield's in and they win the World Series and with the Diamondbacks and Yankees in 20 years ago, or whatever it was. You know, so to me, there's, you know, you can win or lose a game in baseball almost entirely on luck. Can you win over the course of a series or a season? Probably not. But in these kind of individual matchups like we saw against Northwestern and Nebraska last night, weird things can happen, right? You can hit every ball just right on the button, but it's right at a guy. And we've both played in games like that, I'm sure. Or
the frustration that comes with that.
Or you can be hitting the ball really poorly and it's just finding holes here and there, wherever. You end up losing a game. You're like, they didn't hit a hard hit ball all night, you know? And so
sometimes bleeders get you.
Yeah. And so it kind of feels like both of those to me, where Northwestern, obviously they're trying to do certain things, but on most nights it probably wouldn't have worked as well as it did last night against Nebraska. And part of it's also because, like I said, I thought Nebraska looked a little sluggish. They didn't look quite as energetic as they do for some of their other matches.
A little sleepy. I will say this too. There was one, and the reason I bring up, you know, a kill close to the net, there's 4 arms going up on Nebraska's side. And Northwestern finds a way to shoot the field goal. And you know, when two members of the front line go up, they go up together, right? So like it's really like you're putting up a wall. I couldn't believe watching that volleyball go right through both of them.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why I see it as luck a lot of times than not. But when you get really talented players on Nebraska's side of the floor, like Harper Murray, Merritt Beeson, like 2 of many that can control where they're going to put the ball, which is why they get the ball so many times for kills. Like you'll get Harper Murray gets up there so high, and she can either hit the back line, which wasn't challenged, could have been challenged in that first set, and the point would have been given to Nebraska. Doesn't matter. They still won the first set. Or she can lightly touch it because the back row for Northwestern's thinking that she's going to pound it toward them, and she'll find the middle of the floor. I mean, the strategy behind the quick thinking always amazes me.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
With the best of the best on the volleyball court.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's, again, we say luck not to be disrespectful because there obviously is a ton of skill and strategy.
But I think luck is in all sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's luck in football, like you said, baseball. There's luck in basketball. You don't hit half-court shots in basketball at the buzzer and call that skill.
Unless you're Steph
You just
Curry.
don't.
But
I mean, I watched college basketball teams in town when I worked at UNO. They would end practice shooting half-court shots, and they couldn't leave the court until one person made it.
Yeah.
There's a reason there's a reason 20 balls were shot before somebody made it.
Sometimes it took a pretty long time. You know, but there's, especially on those blocks and stuff like that. I mean, you're talking, but the difference between in and out when a ball like deflects off a hand, sometimes you're talking about like a centimeter away on somebody's hand makes the difference between like that ball's going in versus going out. So that's why we say like there's an element of luck, right? Because that level of precision is hard to replicate on a every play basis, right? So every point basis in volleyball. And like you said, it's that way. That's kind of one of the things we like about sports, right? Is that there is these variables that aren't controllable.
That's how you get upsets.
Yeah, that's how you get upsets is people get hot, people get lucky, and that's kind of the fun of it. Obviously, we don't want upsets in college volleyball now because when you're
or down the stretch of the season.
When you're the king of the mountain, you like to stay there. You don't like upsets.
Yeah, we'll take the chalk.
Yeah, let's go chalk the rest of the season. You know, Texas got upset last night. They got swept by Kansas State. Which was, you know, kind of, I didn't see that one, but, you know, that's how things like that happen. And luckily the Husker volleyball team was able to come out with a win last night. But so congratulations to them, going 24-0.
Keep it up.
Another one on Sunday.
Keep it up.
Just keeps on rolling. Listen, we've got TK here on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. We were going to get to Michigan a little bit later, but TK had some thoughts that he wanted to join the show and give us now. So, TK, what's going on, bud?
Morning, fellas. How we doing?
What's up, TK?
Good, how are you?
Oh, no damn paradise. I want to preface this off with, I'm not a lawyer, nor should you be taking my advice just generally.
Just as a person, don't take your advice.
Yeah. This is purely an educational exercise.
Okay.
But
I'm ready to learn.
A lot of the people, and I think this has stemmed from what Joel Klatt said last week, are talking about how Michigan has this right to due process and you can't do anything to them. Like the NCAA nor the Big Ten can do anything to them without some sort of administrative process and investigation. But people are just kind of throwing around due process like they just don't understand what it truly means. So we get that from the 14th Amendment, and like quoting from the 14th Amendment, it says that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. And so, like, you can equate that life, liberty, and property to like any constitutional right. So, and that state part doesn't have to be like the state of Nebraska or the state of Kansas. It can be somebody who is the functional equivalent of the state. So, like a school board or things that are called state actors, where like maybe they privatize the garbage system, and that's like something that is generally a state run function. So that person, the person who owns that place, is essentially the state. That those people, the state or a state actor, have to be the one who deprives you of that due process. It's been long held since like the 80s that the NCAA is not considered a state actor because it's too big. There's no one state that it works in, and it encompasses private and public universities. And so you can kind of think of this, at least in my opinion, like the Big Ten is a small NCAA where, you know, it has the private schools, the Rutgers and the Northwesterns, and it spans across tons of different states, that it can't be tied to any one state. Thus, it does not owe Michigan any due process of law under the 14th Amendment. So the Big Ten, at least on that front, could just bring any like punishment at once to Michigan before any administrative process. There might be some other policies that they have to follow of their own rules, but like this whole due process nonsense are just legal words that like the lawyers at Michigan, which I'm sure they're really good because just kind of throw out there to, you know, draw up some fear of litigation.
Mm-hmm.
TK, we very much appreciate the call there.
That's interesting.
Do you have any follow-up questions there, Andrew?
Well, okay. Oh, well, he's gone.
That's all right. So I think TK's point, which I appreciate, is,
well, essentially, I was just going to ask him is to dumb it down a little bit more.
Yeah. So, and I think I can do that for him. So basically what he's saying is due process is a very specific legal thing.
Correct.
Right.
Which is essentially being fair.
Yes,
right?
It is. Basically, it's why people have a right to a fair trial and things like that before they are theoretically imprisoned or whatever the punishment is, right? So the concept of due process does not qualify under these types of proceedings.
And that made sense too, because he was saying that only the states have
so it's like
the power to do so.
Yeah, so like a state or state actor, so like any government or someone acting on behalf of the government, right? That's what state or state actor means, whether it's the federal government, whether it's the state government, or anyone acting on behalf of those people. So the use of the term due process is, and this is kind of the thing that I took away from Michigan's statement yesterday, was they're basically just threatening to sue the Big Ten. That's basically
right. That's all they have, though.
Yeah, that's basically was the entire point of the statement, was like, hey, if you punish us before the NCAA investigation, then we're going to sue you. And
they're like, we have 10 lawyers that are ready to go.
Well, and listen, Michigan has some of the best lawyers in the country. It's one of the best law schools in the country, so I'm sure they do. But
I'm sure the Big Ten has great ones too.
I'm sure that they're probably a bunch of Ivy League guys, if I had to guess.
Well, one of them who's in the acting role as commissioner
yes.
is a Harvard lawyer.
Yes, that's pretty good. But honestly, the whole, I think it all comes down to, they know that the NCAA investigation is going to take forever, because they always do, and they don't want anything to interrupt this season. So if they say, hey, just wait for the NCAA investigation, we'll take our medicine then, they just want to give themselves a clear path for the rest of this football season.
Well, they're buying time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all they're doing.
All they're trying to do.
They're buying time so they can have Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines against Penn State this weekend. They're buying time so that he can be on the sidelines against Ohio State. They're buying time so that nothing is affecting J.J. McCarthy's Heisman voting or college football playoff. And
like just the negative press is going to affect J.J. McCarthy's Heisman voting.
And you're probably right.
But in terms of an actual punishment, they're just trying to buy themselves time so that they can finish this football season in whatever manner it plays out, in order to try and win a national championship, try and win a Big Ten championship. But TK makes a very good point in that people use words like due process in places where they just do not.
Well, they also use big words to confuse the rest of the people.
And to scare. Right. Basically, they're trying to scare the Big Ten and into, like you said, the fear of
litigation.
But
what's funny is due process isn't scary. Like in this case, when you have all your ducks in a row, due process is like the easiest thing to laugh about.
It's also
because the Big Ten has so much power over Michigan because they are their superior in this moment. Yes, Michigan brings in a ton of income for the Big Ten, but don't think the Big Ten doesn't do the same for Michigan. Yeah. And plus, Michigan foregoed their right to even argue the Big Ten when staying in the Big Ten or being a member of the Big Ten, because it's like being a student in Big Ten, and the Big Ten's the teacher. Yeah. Right? If the teacher tells you, hey, that's wrong, even though you think it's not wrong.
The Big Ten makes the rules.
The Big Ten is allowed to put you in timeout.
Yeah. So basically the only argument that Michigan can have, and because the due process thing is really just like, they use that word to say, hey, if you don't go through these steps that in a way that we like, it's kind of a broad catch-all. If you don't go through the steps in a way that we feel comfortable with, which is like, hey, if you penalize us before the season's over, we're just going to claim you didn't go through due process. That's all they're saying, really. And
good luck.
It's not like anybody respects the NCAA's process anyway, because everybody thinks their investigations are a joke, because they are. So basically all they're saying is, hey, if we don't like the way this goes down, we're going to sue you. That's all they're saying with that part of it. And the other argument that they made in their response yesterday was that, we would never listen to such a low-level staffer like Connor Stalions. And it's like, we literally have video of him standing next to your coordinators telling them things. Like there's
and reacting to an audible on the football field before anybody else, and then you see 7 other people raising their arms in the air.
Yeah, like he's literally talking directly to coordinators and on-field coaches during games, and it is affecting the way those people are signaling in plays.
He wouldn't be on the front line.
He wouldn't be on the sideline.
He would, but no, in all honesty, he wouldn't be on the front line with your coordinators and head coach if he didn't mean something to the game or to them.
And they obviously know who this person is. They obviously listen to him. Otherwise, like you said, he wouldn't be. Not everybody just gets to talk to the coordinators and head coach during games.
You don't?
No, there's like, I don't know.
I can't just walk up to Matt Rhule during the game and be good to go.
There's probably, I would guess, there are people on the support staff that have zero contact with most of their head coaches during games, because that is not their job. That is not what they're there for. And you get too many voices in a coach's ear, and it's going to drive them crazy, number one. And number two, it's going to distract them from the things they actually need to do. usually you have a pretty core group of people, and the position coaches will talk to the coordinators will talk to the head coach. I don't think you have much people outside of the coordinators having direct contact with the head coach during games, unless he goes and talks to them, right? So it's not like you're going to have Connor Stallions up there just chatting up, just chopping it up with coordinators and head coaches just for funsies during a game. That's not how this works.
The other point to this is that it's a violation of the sportsmanship policy. And what is the sportsmanship policy? Let's go back, and I want you to listen to the key word here.
Okay.
Maybe I emphasize it. Maybe I don't.
Okay.
Petitti has executive authority to determine to launch an investigation and whether to punish a team if he deems an offense has occurred. So what does this boil down to? Whatever Tony Petitti feels, right? If he thinks that something happened, he has the power to do it, whether Michigan likes it or not.
Yeah, it's very similar to the NFL's policy they put in place with Commissioner Goodell, where he kind of gets there's kind of a catch-all policy of, and I don't remember what they call it in the NFL, but several years ago, I think it's probably a decade ago now, they put in a policy that the commissioner kind of gets free reign over punishment and all these types of things. And there's listen, you can appeal, but there's not a lot you can do about it because the appeal also goes to Roger Goodell, which is not a great appeal system, but that's the way the NFL set it up. Tony Petitti is basically the Roger Goodell of the Big Ten. He gets free reign under the sportsmanship policy, and I'm sure that's why the sportsmanship policy is in there for things like this. And by the way, Michigan broke actual rules too. Let's not forget that, because Michigan threw the sportsman policy out there,
but only because they were getting heat for getting punished before the season. That the only way to do that was the sportsmanship policy
for that one. Yes. But they were also throwing it out there, being like, hey, Rutgers and Ohio State, they violated the sportsman policy. It's like, yes, maybe, because we don't actually know, because it's just whatever Tony Petitti feels like the sportsmanship policy is. But you guys broke actual Big Ten rules, written, non-gray area, very specific, non-ambiguous Big Ten rules. You cannot scout in person, and you cannot video record.
Is that just a Big Ten rule or an NCAA rule?
I'm not sure, but I know it's a Big Ten rule. I don't know if it is across the NCAA. I would guess it is.
You would have to think.
But I know for sure it is a Big Ten.
Can you imagine? It's allowed in the ACC, but that's it.
I imagine it's got to be an NCAA rule because there's an NCAA investigation, right?
Well, and not only that, you can't have a college football playoff with a bunch of different conferences and allow one team to in-person scout their conference to get there.
So theoretically you're right, but the conferences do have different rules, so it is kind of goofy in that way anyway. But because there's an NCAA investigation, it's safe to assume, I haven't looked it up, but it's safe to assume that it's not legal under the NCAA rules either. So that's the big difference, is yes, there's a sportsmanship policy in which Tony Petitti can be like, hey, yeah, I don't like how you acted here, you're getting punished. But they actually broke real rules too. It's not just Tony Petitti having a vendetta against Michigan. It's like, hey, here's video evidence of you guys breaking rules. What do you want me to, how much more due process would you like? Coming up next, we will have more of the Hurrdat Sports Radio Show with Andrew Rogers and myself. I'm Ravi Lulla. You're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities.
Snap, good protection, kicks it high. Suter backpedaling on a spiral punt, takes it up the 25. Return is on, dodges one man, gets away from him at the 35, on his feet to the 40, to midfield, look out, Suter will go all the way, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Steve Suter, 74 yards. Seconds later, gets the quick snap before Maryland can get set. Backpedaling is Suter. Looks up to take it. He'll get it at his own 23. Up to the 30, to the 35, to the 40. Running for the sidelines. The 40, the 45, midfield. The 45, the 40. Suter down to the 35, the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Steve Suter, 77 yards. Wow. That's what you don't want to do.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
Nice work on the beat drop.
You know, I was trying to time it. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to wait as long to get to the beat drop, so if it doesn't happen right away, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to wait for it.
I mean, you've been embracing your inner creed since the World Series, so you've been waiting to drop the beat.
I've been embracing my inner creed for way longer than that.
Well, I guess it was revitalized during the World Series.
That's just when I felt comfortable being more public about it.
Because other people liked it too.
Yeah, because it was like, okay, it's not just me, it's a real thing. You ever do that where there's
Ravi needs supporters?
It is. You ever do that where there's something you're like, I think I kind of like it. It's like a movie that you're like, man, this might be bad, but I kind of like it. And finally you you realize other people like it too, and you're like, oh, I'm not alone.
So I do have the moments of like, oh wow, I love that, but I like tell people I love things no matter what, and I really don't care how they respond to that.
I really appreciate our coworker David being on the Creed train with me, which is he's probably
so funny.
I don't know David super well, but I get the feeling because he's I think much younger than I am.
Yes, because he's younger than me.
So
I think he's a couple years younger than me.
I get the feeling. So obviously he didn't come by knowing Creed as organically as I did, because I was like listening to them on the radio. Like I remember
you grew up with them.
I remember when Higher was a new song. Like it was I
didn't even know Higher was a song.
With Arms Wide Open.
With Arms Wide Open. Also a good song. I remember when that came out because it came out after Higher, and I was like, "There's more Creed."
Do they not have songs on the radio anymore?
They do, but it's not like Creed is no longer pop hits. They're not
right. They wouldn't be on like your top station.
Yeah, like your top 40 or
are they rock? Are they?
Yeah, it's like a pretty. So I think some people would call them like an alternative.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I think their pop hits are more rock, just regular rock.
Yeah. So you would like hear their songs cycling through, but. They don't have any like new bangers, do they?
They haven't put out an album since 2009.
They call those recurrents.
Oh, is that what they call it?
That's the radio term for it.
I thought that was what sucked me under in an ocean.
No, that's just regular currents.
Oh,
yeah, or undercurrents. So it's so I feel like David almost likes Creed ironically. Like sometimes, I'm going to use the term hipster here, but sometimes hipsters like kind of old things that are bad, just sort of ironically, like, they watch.
Yeah, David seems like the type of guy that grabbed 2 pencils in grade school and was drumming on his textbook.
So I'm hoping he likes them genuinely, but I will take his support regardless of what it is. I think we're going to, I haven't run this by him yet, but I think we're going to run to a concert next year. We're just going to take the whole Hurrdat Sports team to Creed concert because they're going back out on tour. I'm very excited.
I will not be going. I don't even like going to concerts.
I generally don't either because it's like real crowded and whatever, but
not even the crowds. It's just like I can listen to this song anytime I want on Spotify. Now, like people would be like, well, you can watch a Cardinal game anytime on TV, or you can watch Nebraska on TV.
It's the same thing with the energy.
It's a little different because of the energy, but I would rather spend my money on the sporting event than I would on the concert.
See, and I'd rather spend my money on Creed always.
I agree with you, Creed.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like that's not a joke. No. You would much rather spend it on Creed.
Well, it depends on what the sporting event is, but if it's like a regular season game, I would definitely rather spend the money on.
So
Creed.
if Creighton was playing Marquette at home this year, you would rather go to Creed?
Ooh, just a regular season?
Yeah,
game?
just a regular season game.
Yeah, I'm going to Creed.
Wow,
because there's a rarity to it, right? I go to so many Creighton games, and I get Marquette's a big game, but I've been to every big game Creighton's played. Basically pretty much in the last decade, especially if it's a home game. Creed hasn't toured since 2009.
Okay, so say Creed was constantly touring.
That's different. If it was a band that was constantly touring and like,
I mean, because like this is a moment, like I get it, like they're back on tour, and like this could be your one nostalgic moment to say like, hey, I'm gonna get tickets, I'm gonna go. But if this. So, like, I have a buddy that goes to see Travis Scott anytime he can.
Sure, and Travis Scott's, like, active and touring.
Right.
Like,
he's going twice this year.
Probably going to continue tour for the
I've seen Travis Scott already in concert. I don't need to go again.
Yeah.
Whether he's got new songs or not, I don't need to go.
So, for something like that, I would go to the Creighton game. If it was somebody that was, like, constantly touring and still active. This feels like a one-off for Creed, so I'll
allow that point. Yeah. That makes more makes more sense to me than if you were just going concert over sporting event. No, but that's just my that's just my personality.
Most events for a quality Creighton regular season game, a quality Nebraska football regular season game. I would skip most other events for those things. But if this feels like a one-off for the Creed tour, so you got to get in while the getting's good.
Shane, you were about to say something there. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say I agree. I think Creed's great, but I haven't seen the second movie or the third movie. So,
the Creed is actually a great movie.
Dude, this is probably a hot
Michael
take.
B. Jordan.
Yeah, This is probably a hot take. I think the first Creed is the best Rocky franchise movie.
Yeah, definitely hot, like red hot.
Yeah.
And I liked Creed, but and I liked it a lot too because obviously the graphics were today's age and the way the film was shot is today's world. But
the fight was way more real. Like and listen, part of it's the time, right?
Yeah, when you're making a movie, and when was Rocky first made? The 80s?
No, the first one was made in the 70s.
The 70s?
Yeah, or 77.
So
yeah, I was going to say 77.
Even later, right? When you're making a movie in the 70s,
oh, for sure,
your punch through a wall feels like it takes 3 seconds, right?
Yeah.
In today's world, you get like a rotating effect as it goes through the wall.
Yeah, no, it's totally a different thing. And listen, I understand the importance of Rocky historically. It's kind of like, there's certain people that don't love the Beatles. But because if you listen to music now and you listen to their music, some of it can seem a little bit more basic.
Yeah, because they're about yesterday.
That's a good one. But it's because like the Beatles set the foundation for a lot of what rock music still is today, right? Rocky kind of set the foundation for what sports movies are now. So I understand the importance of Rocky, and I love Rocky. I love the Rocky franchise as much as anybody. And there's certain movies that I like even. Like, I'm a big Rocky Balboa guy, the 6th one that everybody kind of forgets about.
I love that movie.
Great movie, right?
The Rocky franchise is just so long.
It is. The only one I don't like is 5. 5 is very bad. The rest of them I all like.
Adrian!
No, that's 1.
I know. That's the best one. You can't tell me.
So,
you cannot tell me Rocky 1 is not the best.
It's definitely the most important one, and it's one of the more important kind of movies of the last 50 years, but I think I enjoy watching Creed more.
Well, and the bad part about franchises, and we talk about this a lot with movies, it's hard to recreate the success of the first one.
It is.
The first one is so good. It taps into something you haven't seen before, and then you try to emulate it, and it's just kind of like oh no, that seemed forced.
And that's what I liked about Creed as opposed to some of the other Rocky sequels. I'm going to watch them and I'm going to like them because I like the characters and I like the story and I like boxing, right? But I felt like Creed captured the spirit of the first Rocky better than any of the other sequels.
What do you think is the best sequel movie? Like the best number 2 movie?
So there's two that are, I think, the correct answers. It's either The Godfather 2, or The Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back.
Those are probably the 2 best sequels of all time.
Does Home Alone 2 make its way in?
No, it does not. Shane,
Home Alone 2 is
going
a
to
great
say
movie.
something?
You know what? I'll take it.
She likes it.
So
Avery does.
She's
I
big
feel
on
like
Home
I
Alone.
talked about this. I think I took a lot of heat. Well, I've taken a lot of heat for this with my friends.
For liking
with
Home Alone
Shane.
being your favorite?
No. With DB. Yeah. Never seen Star Wars.
And listen, I've
never seen it.
I don't care. Like, my wife hasn't seen Star Wars either. I'm not one of those people. Like, I like it. If you wanted to learn more about it, I'd be like, hey, here are some reasons you might like it. But I'm not one of those people that, like, if you don't like the things I like, for the most part, I don't care. Like, it's your life. You do what you want with it. I really enjoy Star Wars. I understand that it's not for everybody. I also understand there's some of it that's not very good, and I like it anyway, right? Like, objectively, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, kind of cheesy. It's a way different vibe than the first one.
Side note, Travis says Rocky 4 is excellent.
I love Rocky 4, right? But it's a very different vibe and a very different movie than Rocky 1. Kind of cheesy. Like, the Soviet Union chanting USA is kind of a weird, like, it's a tough sell. I'm in it. I'm in for it, right? But I'm not going to be mad if people are like, yeah, it's not really for me. Yeah, like, if you don't like Star Wars or you don't watch Star Wars, I'm okay with it.
I don't even know if it's a lack of not liking it. It was just that I was never into it as a kid.
Yeah, so it's
so
hard
like
to
I
get
never
into it
had
later.
action figures. I never had anything like that. So it was hard for me to be like, wow, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, this is great. Like, the only Darth Vader I know is Zurg and Buzz Lightyear. Like, that's Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader to me.
Yeah, and I grew up on it, so it's a huge difference, right? Coming up next, we're going to get into a little bit of college football playoff scenarios here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. will be back.
Yards! Wow! 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Steve Suter! 5, return is on, dodges one man, gets away from him. Return is on, dodges one man, gets away from 7 yards! Wow! Yards! Wow!
We
Return
will
is
be
on.
back.
Dodges one man, gets away. Touchdown, Steve Suter, 74 yards. Later, gets the quick snap before Maryland can get set. Back bundling is Suter. Looks up to take it. He'll get it up. 74 yards. Gets the quick snap before Maryland can get set. Back.
We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back. Wrapping up hour number 1. I got the hour right today.
Nice.
Nailed it. Off to a good start.
Nice music ramp there.
Thank you. We are wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. That other voice you heard was Shane Schillerberg, our producer. We're brought to you by our friends at Dingman's Collision Center. We love Dingman's and their 4 great Omaha area locations. They've been family owned and operated in Omaha for over 25 years, and they have been voted first place best of Omaha for 18 years running. And there's 2 main reasons for that. A, they've got the latest technology so they can work on any make and model of your car. And B, they invest back into the community with every car repaired in their Dingman's Give Back program. Make sure you go to dingmans.com to learn more about their services, about their Give Back program, and go over and visit them to get the best customer experience you'll ever have. That's Dingman's Collision Center. Wanted to hop into the college football playoff here. So the rankings came out again this week. Nothing changed from from the previous one. Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State are your top 4. But there's some interesting discussions to be had because you've got an undefeated Washington at 5.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a very good Oregon team at 6. You've got some blue blood lurkers just outside of that in Texas and Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
There's some really, really high quality 1-loss teams that are going to have opportunities here. For instance, I mean, obviously Penn State plays Michigan this week, right? That's a huge opportunity for them and a huge opportunity for Michigan to solidify themselves in that group. Ole Miss plays Georgia this week, right? That's a huge opportunity for Ole Miss and one of the biggest potential stumbling blocks of the season for Georgia. Georgia's got kind of a tough schedule on the way out. We looked at Georgia's schedule this year and said, they don't have much, and they didn't. But Mizzou ended up being really good, so that was a tough game. They only pulled that out 30-21. They're at Ole Miss, or they're at home against Ole Miss this week. That's the number 9 team in the country. Then they go on the road next week at Tennessee, the number 13 team in the country. So Georgia's got their work cut out for them. And listen, do I expect them to finish the season undefeated? Still, sure. But they've got some hurdles in their way that we didn't really see at the start of the year, because I thought Tennessee would regress more than they have. And good on Coach Heupel and them to stay up at the top of the pack there. But it's interesting. So, like, obviously Ohio State has Michigan left. They basically have a one, not counting any conference championship games, right? Because we don't know what those matchups are yet. Ohio State basically has a 1-game season left. They've got Michigan at the end of the year. That's their season. Before that, they've got Michigan State and Minnesota. Neither one of those should be issues. So Ohio State, your number 1 team, basically just has to clear Michigan.
Well, and I think Florida State's kind of in the boat that Cincinnati was in a couple of years ago. Didn't have the toughest schedule in the world, but they're going to come out and win the ACC. There's not a doubt in my mind that that's what happens. Like they played LSU to open the year. Like, I don't want to take that win away from Florida State, but after that, they haven't played anyone.
Yeah, because Clemson was down.
Actually,
at the time they were pretty good.
Florida State was down.
Well,
they didn't have Travis.
Yeah.
And Clemson was the favorite. So maybe I'm not giving them as much credit as they deserve. But if you look at the back half of their season, they played a down Duke team, and they won 38-20. I believe. Is that the game? Did Riley Leonard get hurt in that game?
No, that's the game he came back for, I believe.
Okay.
So he was there for that one, but I think it was his first game back, and so he wasn't super sharp. But Duke's the second best team they've played this year after LSU, who LSU I think we kind of knocked for a while, but I think we understand they're pretty good now. Their record's probably not going to end up being what we thought it was going to be. Clemson, obviously, they got that win against Notre Dame last week, but they're only 5-4. Duke is 6-3.
Yeah, VTech's not a good team. Syracuse isn't a good team. Wake Forest isn't a good team, and Pittsburgh isn't a good team. You have Miami, North Alabama, and Florida, who's also not a good team.
Yeah, so Miami's 6-3, so that's an opportunity for an okay win.
But kind of what I'm getting at is, like, when I say they're the Cincinnati, they just have the easiest schedule of those that are in the top 10 in the college football playoff rankings. So I don't see them dropping out of 4, because you can't keep giving them 4 and then just make them 5 if they go undefeated. You just can't do that.
Here's my concern, though, is so Washington undefeated at number 5, right? They've got number 18 Utah this week, on the road at number 12 Oregon State. Then they've got Washington State, who's only 4-5, but that's a tough team. And then they'll play, I'm guessing, Oregon again in the Pac-12 championship. So they're going to have 3 top 20 games while Florida State has none. That's where, if they go undefeated in that stretch, I could see them leapfrogging.
And that they could, but you also have to remember that Ohio State and Michigan is going to take a loss. And
so that might keep Florida State in.
And that may drop Ohio State or Michigan to 5. Now, I'm not saying it will,
but it very well
but it could. Now, how often do we see an undefeated team not make the top 4?
From the Power 5, not very often.
Right.
So
especially from the ACC, who's been dominant over the last 10 years, and they've won, 3 college football championships? Like, did Clemson win 2 or just 1?
Clemson won 2.
So and Florida State won 1 in
13?
So, 10 years ago.
Yeah, so they've got 3 in the last 10. So, I mean, I think you look at the ACC this year, though, and you say, obviously the Pac-12 is better than them this year. The Big Ten is better than the ACC.
And that's why that's why I made the correlation with Cincinnati and Florida State.
It's been that's the problem with the ACC this year, is a lot of the teams that have lifted up the conference, the Clemsons of the world, are a lot weaker than they have been. Duke is still pretty okay. They didn't face North Carolina this year, so that's a problem for Florida State. That's a a schedule that doesn't do them any favors. Now, if they go undefeated, I think they get in still, right? But I do worry about, because, I mean, look at the strength of schedule for Michigan. Obviously whoever gets, what's going to get really interesting is if Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State all end up with one loss in the regular season. Because you're going to have a really good one-loss team that's not in the, or you're going to have two really good one-loss teams that are not in the Big Ten championship game. And then you're going to have the Big Ten champion. And it's going to be really hard to keep a one-loss Big Ten champion out of the college football playoff.
Right.
And do they hop over an undefeated weak ACC champion? That I don't know. That's where it becomes really tricky. Washington, if they go undefeated, they're absolutely in because the Pac-12.
Yeah, you got to slot them in.
The Pac-12 is,
well, they're going to play Oregon again.
Yes, the Pac-12 is stacked this year. Again, where it would get interesting is if Washington wins up until Oregon, and then Oregon wins the rematch, and then you've got a split series with Washington and Oregon. You've got these two teams from arguably, you could make the argument the Pac-12 has been the best conference in football this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially the top half of that league has been really, really good.
Right.
So you're looking at, again, it'd be the same deal.
Potentially two Pac-12 teams jumping in there.
With one loss. And you're probably
you have to give the Pac-12 champion that spot.
Yes.
If Oregon still only has one loss. If Oregon wins, they get the spot over Washington no matter what. I know Washington would make the argument, but Oregon won the bigger game. It's unfortunate, but the first game was only separated by 3 points. If the first game was separated by 30 points, it would be completely different.
Like 2 touchdowns. It's
right?
way different, right?
But this is a moment where you have to win the big one. And they would give that edge to Oregon because that win is superior to the other.
And here's where the situation could get really messy. Let's say Georgia goes undefeated and wins the SEC title. Let's say Florida State goes undefeated and wins the ACC title. Then you've got theoretically a one-loss Ohio State, a one-loss Michigan, a one-loss Penn State. One of those is going to be a one-loss Big Ten champion. Let's say Oregon beats Washington. You've got a really good Washington team with one loss. You've got a really good Oregon Pac-12 champion team with one loss. And you've got a mediocre undefeated Florida State team. And I'd be mediocre by their strength of schedule and their conference, right? I think Florida State's good. I don't know that I think Florida State's better than Washington and Oregon, though.
It's just hard to knock them out if they still have the zero.
But I mean,
because here's the point. Here's the problem. Like, the point you're making isn't, hey, if Washington goes undefeated, they don't deserve the spot more than Florida State, because they absolutely do based on their schedule. But it's if they each have one loss.
Yes, and Florida State's undefeated. Right. That's where you look at it and go.
Here's what I think. Here's what I think. Ohio State has played the tougher schedule than Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Up until this point.
Yeah, I think that's
we can decide after Penn State where Michigan falls in that category. But Ohio State still has that Notre Dame win, right? And Notre Dame was a really good football team at the time. They've since kind of dipped off, but they're still a really good football team. If you look at,
they're still 20th in the
there you go. They're 7-3, but they're 20th in the CFP rankings. Ohio State will still have that one, even if Michigan State wins against Penn State. Then let's just say Ohio State beats Michigan, so Ohio State has the edge. Michigan and everything surrounding them,
they probably get left out.
They probably get dropped to 5.
I would think.
Florida State probably stays at 4.
Yeah.
And the winner of Washington, Oregon in the Pac-12 championship jumps to 3. That's how I see this happening. Georgia will stay at either 1 or 2. I could actually see them being the 2 if Ohio State wins out and beats Michigan in the game before the Big Ten championship, and then boom, they're in there with an undefeated record. Ohio State could be the 1. Georgia at 2. Then I would probably slot in Washington, Oregon at 3, and Florida State at 4.
So in that scenario, it works out much cleaner. Where it would get really, really messy is if Michigan loses this week at Penn State and then goes and beats Ohio State in 2 weeks.
And that's why I love the college football playoff conversation, because there's so much changeover. There's so many things that can happen. A great point made here by, is it Trav? Yeah, it's Travis. This would have been such an excellent year for the 12-team playoff to begin.
It really would have, because there's pretty close to 12 teams that I think are not that much different than one another.
Well, and think about who's on the border of getting in that 12. You have Tennessee, like we talked about. You have Mizzou, who played a very close game against LSU in Georgia. You have a good LSU team bordering at 19. It's interesting.
Coming up next, we've got Mitch Sherman from The Athletic coming up here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I mean, it was fun to watch him play. You know, again, I said that you don't realize how much of a ball player he is and how twitchy and all that stuff he is. He was fun to watch, you know, and now it's just about him getting back his legs back and all that stuff and his air back and his game speed back. But it allows you to move guys around. I mean, in the one package we put we actually put Gift down at linebacker and move Keese back, and so he was in the secondary. So that it gives you a lot of versatility back there and a lot of different combinations. And Coop's doing a really, really nice job of mixing around the pieces and stuff. And when you have that kind of versatility, then it allows you to explore different coverages and see what you can do.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities. We now welcome in on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline our friend from The Athletic, Mitch Sherman. Mitch, how are you this morning?
I'm well. What's going on? How are you guys?
Good to see you, Mitch.
Good to see you too.
You know, we're just bouncing around from all sorts of stuff, from best sequel of all time to college football playoff. Do you have a candidate for best sequel of all time, Mitch?
Yeah, I was listening to you guys as I was taking my son to school. So I really like Superman 2. Some of the stuff that you know with the evil villains that came from Krypton. Thought that was an upgrade over Superman 1, which is rare to find a better version of the movie in the second. But I'm with you, Ravi, on the Star Wars series. Empire Strikes Back was a great sequel, and there were many other very good sequels whether they're sequels or I don't know. They're all sequels after the first. Right. There were a lot of good ones there. I think I'm actually partial to Rocky 4 of all the Rockies. It's like so wildly unrealistic and entertaining that plus if that had been the first one, I wouldn't have liked it, but you're so bought in on the characters by that point that you're just give me the craziest storyline you can get. It's basically the same movie as Rocky 3. They just took everything up a notch. Like Clubber Lang becomes Ivan Drago. Everything, instead of Mick dying, is like it's all just a little bit more wild, and I'm there for it with Rocky 4.
Well, and it single-handedly ended the Cold War, so I mean, how can you go wrong? Mitch,
they're on the wall. That's why they did
it. we were, I'm following you on Twitter and looking at the stuff that you're writing. If I had told you at the start of the year that you'd be writing a full-length feature on Elliott Brown, I guess what would have gone through your mind? How would you have been like, what happened here today? Like, how did that story come to be?
I would have wondered for sure if I was writing about him because he was playing. And if that was the case, it would have been somewhat eyebrow raising, even with all the injuries that Nebraska's had at wide receiver. Elliott Brown hasn't been somebody who's been on the field, but he's made an impact. Mm-hmm. And it came about because after the Purdue game, Matt Rhule was asked about Marcus Satterfield going upstairs to the press box to call plays from that vantage point. And he said, we've got Elliott Brown on the sidelines and he's the cheat code. And my ears perked up when I heard that because it just sounded interesting. And Rhule has a tendency to do that where he drops these things in, like on Monday when he just dropped in the middle of an answer about Minnesota and Michigan State that one of the teams they played scouted them. And it's like, well, yeah, we know that, but like most coaches haven't just brought it up on their own. And he did. So that was worthy of a follow-up. And the same thing with this Elliott Brown stuff. It's like, okay, what do you mean he's a cheat code? So I asked about it and then was able to talk to Elliott for an extended period of time. And I know his dad, Lance, know him, like I covered him. We're same age. And
right.
So I was in school with Lance and was a student writing about him on those great 90s teams. And Lance was a character. I mean, like one of the most colorful, like flamboyant players who played at Nebraska. And Elliott's got that personality, but it manifests in such a different way. And I was aware of his social media following. Like he's a TikTok star, or was, he's put that aside, but he was this TikTok star and a YouTuber and, has hundreds of thousands of followers. I mean, people knew about him for things that went way beyond football when he got to the program in 2020. And Elliott, as Elliott was open to talking about whatever. And, he said that did not sit well with the guys when he walked into the locker room. But once they figured out who he was, he just kind of put his head down. And once they figured out who he was, he won them over. And, that's gone to the next year where because Garrett McGuire and Marcus Satterfield are upstairs, Elliott Brown has taken on the role of coaching the wide receivers on the field. And sometimes Garrett will say, hey, give Malachi or Jalen or Jaden Doss or Alex Bullock, give one of those guys the headset, and he'll speak directly to them. But most of the time it's Elliott as the mouthpiece, as the voice for Garrett McGuire, who's upstairs diagnosing defenses. And he's getting things lined up and he's signaling in plays. I mean, he's sacrificed whatever opportunity he had to play, as a backup to put on this headset and be a coach. And, Satterfield said he's like Pete Rose. He's a player coach. And, maybe not the greatest analogy with Pete Rose, but whatever. I mean,
he was a really good player.
He was a player and coach. And
he's not playing for Iowa with that analogy.
He doesn't have all the qualities of Pete Rose, but just some. And and the crazy thing is, and then Elliott, right after this happens, or a few weeks after it happens, and he takes on this new role, he tore his ACL in practice last week. So he found something for himself that may end up being his future, and then he got hurt. They still put him on the travel roster last week to Michigan State, one of those coveted 74 spots. He went and took one of those spots 3 days after he tore his ACL. And then he went into Garrett McGuire on Sunday back in Lincoln and said, hey, should I delay this surgery so I can be on the sideline for the last 3 games? And Nebraska coaches said, absolutely not. Take care of yourself. You need to get this surgery so you can start rehabbing. He has 2 years of eligibility left. And, we'll see how he uses them. Maybe he'll come out and fight for a spot in the receiver rotation, or, maybe he'll keep that headset and go into coaching, or, we'll see. But really interesting player, really interesting person on this Nebraska roster for all kinds of reasons that have not that much to do with what he's done on the field.
Mitch, as I was reading your article or your story about Elliott, I couldn't help but make a correlation. Tell me if it's a stretch here or if I'm kind of on the right track. Of a lot of the things we heard about Garrett McGuire when he was hired by Matt Rhule sounded really similar in my mind to what we were hearing Garrett McGuire talk about Elliott Brown. Did you make that connection as well, or am I stretching a little bit there?
Yeah, they really hit it off, and they talked for the first time on the phone last year. Garrett hit the ground running at Nebraska, and he just got hired off that Carolina Panthers staff as a 23-year-old wide receivers coach. And, he started talking to Nebraska players on the phone before he set foot in Lincoln. And Elliott's one of the guys that he talked to. And, Elliott said, I had no preconceived notion. People gave him that benefit of the doubt and didn't have preconceived notions about him when he came to Nebraska with this reputation as an influencer instead of a football player. So, he pays that forward and didn't have that kind of, took that approach with McGuire, who's 23 years old, and people have questions about him. What kind of assistant coach is he going to be? Is he ready to come into the Big Ten and be a full-time assistant? And, that allowed their relationship to start on a great note. And when they got together in person and Nebraska coaches started to see the work ethic that Elliott showed through the offseason. I mean, his dad says that the workouts in the winter and like the mat drills and spring practice, that stuff, Elliott loves that more than he does the game day environment. And, in part because he's not playing meaningful reps on Saturdays. He's played in 2 games this year, played in a couple games or 1 game maybe in 2021, but savors the whole experience. And yeah, I mean, that's what Garrett McGuire was like at Baylor as a backup quarterback for Matt Rhule. And, his dad, of course, Joey, Garrett's dad, Joey, was on that staff and is now the head coach at Texas Tech. And, Garrett's just see with the Nebraska offense this year. I mean, he is on the fast track in coaching. And it takes one kind with Garrett McGuire to understand who you're talking to and what kind of a future he has in this business. It remains to be seen if that's even the route that Elliott Brown chooses to take. He might go into business like his dad, but coaching is there for him as a possibility now when he didn't really look at it that way until he connected with Garrett McGuire and started to learn, about Garrett and how Garrett went about his business. And these coaches at Nebraska have really opened up a new side, not just in Elliott Brown, but I think in a lot of players on this roster, for them to be able to understand things about themselves and how maybe they can help their team or help whatever the people who are around them in their lives more than they recognized before these guys took over in Lincoln.
Mitch, I want to get your thoughts on one other thing before we get into the matchup this week and some other things surrounding the program. We were talking this morning about Michigan, and so we'll do a little Mitch on Michigan, maybe Michigan. Can I make that?
Yes.
Can I make
there
that?
we go. Make a new segment out of that. I mean, we talk about Michigan. I talk about Michigan every day. So,
So Mitch, I'm curious. I want to know your thoughts on Michigan's response to the Big Ten on the scandal, and if you think it's just a ploy to prolong punishment so that it doesn't have effect on the outcome of this season.
Yeah, it's like, look over. Hey guys, look over here. Look over here. Over here. Don't look at what we're doing. Rutgers and Ohio State and Purdue, they're trading stories about our. That's a different crime. And two wrongs don't make a right anyway. So it's not like just because other Rutgers wasn't sending, Ohio State wasn't sending coaches or staffers into the seats at other games. So, I hear the argument that it's still advanced scouting, but those people who were doing this advanced scouting for, against Michigan, they were supposed to be at those games. They were there with a job to do. And just because they then go and talk with each other about what Michigan does, I mean, that's not really something that's easy. None of this is easy to police, but that's way down deep in the gray area. No, and that never would have come out. Michigan's never going to bring that up. Other teams could bring that up too. I'm sure Nebraska, in its day as a feared program, had plenty of opponents in the Big 8 and the Big 12 who talked about the Huskers behind their back, whether it was about signals or 10, whatever it might be. These coaches are all friends. I mean, I've been to the conventions that they go to in the off season, and they stand there for hours and talk with each other in the hallway. Well, what do you think they're talking about? I mean, how do you beat Michigan? How do you Michigan's at the top. How do you get over on them? And if that's about, look, when they do this, you can expect a run play or you can expect a whatever, those conversations have nothing to do with Michigan's scheme that it concocted this elaborate scandal that they're deep into to steal video and match it up with game film. I mean, what they are accused of doing, is way beyond the gray area. It's a big time violation of the sportsmanship clause that exists for the Big Ten, and then in addition, rules that govern college football at the NCAA level. So they can continue to try to get people to look in a different direction. And I think that's what they're doing this week. But in the end, I don't know that it's going to make much of a difference in what the Big Ten decides and ultimately what the NCAA decides. But, clearly I think the concern on the part of everyone who's not wearing the maize and blue is that Jim Harbaugh is going to be long gone when Michigan gets served with its punishment, and they're going to have gotten away with whatever they get away with this season in 2023, however far they go, without him having to pay the price. And obviously others in the Big Ten and around the country aren't too happy about that.
We're talking with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, as we kind of turn our attention to Nebraska and their upcoming game against Maryland, obviously the quarterback position is going to be one of the most highly watched of the week, as it always is. I thought Coach Rhule said something really interesting in his, I can't remember if it was his post-game presser or if it was his Monday presser, but he talked about how not everybody wants to be in the positions that Heinrich Haarberg wants to be in. Did you take that as, because I guess, how did you take that? Well, let's start there. How did you take that comment from Rhule? Because I thought it was really interesting that he singled out the fact that Haarberg kind of craves that pressure.
It was hard for my mind not to go right to the other guys at that spot, and for me to wonder if that's truly the separator for Heinrich Haarberg, and just that he's a better teammate. And I think Jeff Sims is a good teammate. Don't get me wrong. He has been there and has been supportive. And I've heard not one word this season about him, being a problem in the locker room or on the sidelines since he was benched. He was injured for sure at first in the Colorado game, but he's healthy now and is on the bench. So he's handled it about as well as you could from that standpoint. But Haarberg has done other things to make him a good teammate beyond just not being a problem. I mean, none of these guys are problems. They have good guys at the QB spot. But I think what Rhule sees with Haarberg is that he's got a competitive fire that, and this is my interpretation of that answer, that they're not seeing from everybody else at that position. He's the one who truly wants to be out there. I think in the mind of these coaches, they have questions about how badly the other guys want to do it and what would happen if you put them into a game and a bad situation comes up. They wonder about how the other options at QB would respond. What they know with Haarberg is that he's going to get back up and he's going to go back in that game and he's going to clear his mind and he's going to try as hard as he can to do everything for the team. And that does take a unique player. I mean, we've seen it over many years at Nebraska that players are asked to perform in difficult situations, hard circumstances, when seasons are, when you're playing out the string, when it's not going the way you want. And there have been plenty of guys who have lost some of their edge in that moment. They see the opposite with Haarberg. They see somebody who wants it as badly as the guy who wants it the most on the roster. And that's a great attribute to have in your starting quarterback. And it makes it really difficult to go away from him when you have questions, I think, about what the other options at the position can bring you. Nobody else has proven they can do it. So it's not like you've got an alternative to some of these struggles that Nebraska's had, where it's just sitting out there and you say, well, if we put this guy in, we know what we're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get from the others.
So Mitch, are you someone, just based off that answer, and maybe, we can just assume that your response would be, it's not very long, or it is very long, I should say. But in terms of talking about the leash on Heinrich Haarberg, if mistakes and inconsistency keeps up, are you somebody that thinks that his leash is actually pretty long and it's not very short?
I think it's pretty long. It's not never ending. There could be a moment where they just feel like they've got to go with a different look. Not to say that you're benching him forever, but maybe a situation arises where the turnovers get even worse, where you just feel like there's no rhythm or flow with the offense. Maybe Chubba Purdy shows something in practice that you haven't seen a couple months of the season. And I know they say that he's been good and they like what he does and he's a great athlete, but I think they're looking for something out. They're looking for something more before they haven't put him in. So that's a fact that we know. He hasn't been in a game. So what needs to happen in order for him to get in the game? I don't think it's just the quarterback who's out there has to play worse. He's got to show them something else that they're not seeing from him. So we don't know if maybe that moment happened this week in practice. And if it did, and then you see some struggles from Haarberg, okay, maybe there's a spot where you put Purdy in there. But I'm going into these last three games expecting that as long as Haarberg is healthy and short of just a complete disaster on the offensive side, he's going to be the guy. And I know there's people probably listening to me right now saying, what do you think last Saturday was? Well, it wasn't a complete disaster. I mean, it was 20-17 with 5 or 6 minutes left in that game. And he had just led them on a drive when it looked like Nebraska was down and out, down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. He's the one who had the 40-plus yard run that put them down at the goal line. And yeah, he made mistakes throughout and the interceptions that he threw and some of the passes that he threw that didn't go down as interceptions were just, really, really difficult to understand and I think to swallow as a Nebraska coach or a Nebraska fan. But they had an opportunity to win at the end. And that's what Matt Rhule wants. He wants these games to go into the fourth quarter, and he believes that he's building a program and putting together a team with the kind of resolve that they're going to win those games in the fourth quarter. We haven't seen it with great consistency yet, although, at Illinois, they did that. Against Purdue, they staved off a late charge by the Boilermakers. So there's, hindsight's 20/20, but I think they felt pretty decent about Nebraska's opportunity to pull another one of those things out on Saturday in East Lansing, despite how ugly it looked.
Mitch, just a couple minutes left here. How do you balance, if you're Marcus Satterfield, the things that he sees on tape and in games where he's like, hey, these plays will work, and then we see receivers getting open and the concept of the play working versus the struggles of Heinrich Haarberg to execute that? As you kind of like put yourself in his shoes as you continue to call plays, how do you balance that? Because it's really frustrating to just see incomplete pass after incomplete pass. But if the guys are open, I mean, do you still keep calling those plays?
You have to. I mean, you can't just give up on the pass game. You have to go with what you know, and really, with as much time as Heinrich has now had in the system as the quarterback, you're talking about 7 games. You have enough on tape from games that I think you have to use that and put more faith and value in what he's done in games than you do with what you see in practice. But physically, it's important to know what he's capable of. And if you're not seeing it in games or in practices, then I think you have to take that out of your arsenal as a play caller. If you know he can do it, you think, you believe in him, you believe he can do it, you're working on him with the cerebral aspect of it. They talked this week, Satterfield did, about Haarberg clearing his mind and playing free. And, he's working with, their sports psychology people to try to get himself in a place on the field on Saturday, where he's able to maximize his abilities. I think it's a good sign that Haarberg is open to that stuff, that he's not just, that he's actually willing to work with them to try to best in himself. It's a balance for sure that Satterfield faces in looking at the results on the field on Saturday and understanding what he can do based on practice. But I think you still have to take risks. You still have to try to push the envelope. If it leads to mistakes, you can live with it. If it's a mistake that's made out of aggression, and that's similar to what Tony White's dealing with on the defensive side. They want to be aggressive. They want to take risks. And I think you're going to see you're not going to see that change over the last 3 games. If anything, you're going to see Nebraska maybe up the level with which it chooses to take some risks, and because it knows that's what gives it the best shot to win.
Mitch, quickly here, 30 seconds. Both teams are 5-4. Both desperately need a win to be bowl eligible. For it to be Nebraska, they need to do what better than Maryland on Saturday?
Okay, good. I'm glad you didn't ask me for a prediction because I don't have one. They have to limit the turnovers and play well on special teams. And I'm going to write about that for Friday. Those are the 2 things where they really fell back against Michigan State in comparison to the previous 3 games that they won. Got to do better on punt returns and in all aspects of special teams this week. And you can't lose the turnover margin 3-0. If you got to be even or better than Maryland in this.
I'll be looking forward to
Sherman
that story.
From The Athletic. Mitch, we appreciate your time as always.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mitch.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on a Thursday on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as Twitter and YouTube. I want to tell you about our friends over at Pratt Dental. Pratt Dental is located in North Platte, Nebraska, and Dr. Pratt was the first dentist in Nebraska to get certified in the BioClear method. The BioClear method can correct many aesthetic dilemmas in a permanent and less invasive manner than traditional treatments. Make sure you give Pratt Dental a call, 308-221-2800. Pratt Dental, creating healthy smiles.
Shane still got PBS on over in the corner. You can see it on the stream right now. He was watching the Nebraska volleyball game last night, right in his little shed, and I think he left PBS on. Shane, you enjoying your show up there?
I love it.
It's Nature Cat, apparently. I used to watch when I was a nanny. I used to watch a ton of.
You were a nanny?
Yeah.
You were a manny?
I was a manny for 2 years in college. I was a manny.
For like what ages? Is that why you hate kids? Did they turn you off?
No, I liked those kids. They were cool. So there were 5 kids, which was a lot.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
You managed 5 kids.
Yeah. So they were, when I started, they were 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And then by the time I was done, or maybe 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. That is so young. Yeah. And then I was there for about 2 years. So, yeah.
Were they related?
Yeah. Yes.
You could handle 5 kids, but you just don't. So why in college was it different with kids for you?
So honestly, it's not even. I don't know. I think my patience has grown shorter for whatever reason. I'm not really sure. But honestly, the reason that I decided I didn't want kids was I figured out how busy adulthood was.
Sure.
Where it's like, man, you're always doing stuff. If you add taking care of another person, like a tiny person who is dependent on you for everything to this equation, that sounds terrible.
Sounds magical.
And then the other thing, I was like, oh man, being an adult is expensive. Paying for another, like bankrolling another person's life, not what I want to do here.
Well, you get that with me. I'm the tiny person here. So.
But then
so when you were a Manny, was it like having a company credit card?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it was pretty chill. The parents were super cool. The mom used to work with my mom, so that's how I got kind of hooked up in the whole situation. And the kids were pretty chill. We watched a lot of PBS. I'm not going to lie to you. There was a lot of Dinosaur Train, which I enjoyed. I learned a lot from Dinosaur Train, which, I like dinosaurs, so that was cool. There was a show about reading called Super Y. That was pretty solid.
That's still on.
That was pretty solid. Those were the 2 I remember, but it was pretty solid. I didn't mind the PBS. We'd go outside, play sports and stuff a lot. It was a good time.
So Travis says nannying kids on the side is completely different than actually having kids. Like, I'm not arguing that point at all. What I'm arguing is Ravi hates kids.
Yeah, now I don't even like to be around kids. It's
so that's what shocks me when he throws a bomb like this on me.
Yeah, so I didn't used to mind it as much. I do feel like my patience has gotten like much shorter with children. And so now it's just like, I just don't even.
I'm sure you like being like, you have a sister, right?
I've got 2 sisters and a brother.
Yes, I'm assuming you have nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
So you probably like giving them back. Like you would like be around them, but it's the fact that you can give them back.
So yeah, I definitely don't want to keep them. But
so that's the aspect too of nannying though.
Yes.
Like they're not yours.
There's
like that's why it's okay for you.
Light at the end of the tunnel.
But it still shocks me that like when they're
I wouldn't do it
when
now.
They're not in any way related to you. That you were like, yes, for 2 years.
Yeah, no,
like maybe 20 minutes that would make sense, but 2 years.
No, it wasn't. It was a pretty good job. The kids were cool. The parents were cool. No, I certainly wouldn't do it now, though. Even if I would not do it now.
If they asked you, like, hey, Ravi, like we have X, Y, and Z, can you watch like the 2 kids for 5 hours? Is that too long for you?
For those kids?
Like
my nieces
and nephews.
Yeah, way too long.
You're insane.
I will watch them long enough for like one Harry Potter film.
Oh, that could be 5 hours.
No, that's like the last 2 combined. No, when I watch my nieces and nephews, which is not very often, because I don't like doing it, but basically we either watch Harry Potter or Star Wars because they all like Harry Potter and Star Wars. So it's like, all right, we'll get you some food, we'll get you some snacks, and we're gonna watch a movie. And if that movie's over, I'm calling my brother, be like, hey, it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. And then we put on another movie or show. They like The Mandalorian a lot, so that
okay.
helps.
So we're doing the Hurrdat Sports Hot Seat,
yes,
right?
It's
a great transition.
Let's do it.
One of my questions for you is, what movie title best describes your life?
Oh man, that's a loaded question.
Could be anything. Really could.
Yeah, it really could. I'm trying to think here. Movie title that best describes my life. Man, that's almost one I need advance notice on. That's hard. My first
yeah, go with your instinct.
My first initial.
Don't say Rocky.
No, my first initial thought was Moneyball.
Because you like trying to find diamonds in the rough everywhere you can in life.
I mean, yeah, and I like having money is nice.
That is true.
I like
although the A's didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah, you said the title, not the actual premise of the movie.
Right,
so
yeah, you're right.
That was my first initial one.
Well, it's certainly not the pacifier because we know you don't like kids.
That's true. Yeah, and
you're out on that.
Not pacifier. I think I'll keep thinking on that, but that's the first one that came to mind. What about you?
I'm like looking through like a list of movies right
I know,
now.
right?
The Hunger Games, 'cause I'm always hungry. I like to eat.
That's funny.
No, although it doesn't like look like it, but I do.
You still got that. You still got that fast metabolism. That's the way to go.
Kinda. Like I was explaining this to somebody the other day, and like like me, I weigh. I think it's like 170 now.
Okay.
But I used to weigh like on average between 160 and 165. But when I put on 5 pounds, like a skinny person can tell when they put on 5 pounds.
Sure. Yeah.
And like that still sounds like like nails on a chalkboard to people out there, but it is true. Like I can physically tell that I like gained weight.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's why I like know that my metabolism slowed down, because I gained those 5 pounds, and now I'm trying to be like, all right, man, like some of these pants like don't fit. Like I either need to get like, that's why do you think I wear sweatpants all the time, Robbie? I'm at a point now where I put on my my khaki Lulus, and like the button's about to pop off. I'm sucking in a little bit,
a little tighter.
No, I think I'll go with the Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, that's a good one.
There's some other ones on this list that like I Am Legend. Like that seems like such a Shane movie.
That's something I would say because I am an egomaniac, but I Am Legend. Definitely.
Shane, what would your movie be?
Well, I was named after a movie. I was named after Shane, so I'll just go with that.
Oh, come on, Shane.
I feel like Shane's movie is Are We There Yet? Because all he wants to do is finish the show so he can go outside and vape.
Yeah. He's just...
I'm too exhausted from being amazing yesterday.
He's too exhausted from being amazing yesterday. Okay.
What you got, Robbie?
Well, yeah, I was looking for movies with dogs in the title too, because my life is consumed by my 4 dogs.
101 Dalmatians.
Kind of, yeah. That's a pretty.
And you're kind of like Cruella DeVille because you hate kids.
Yeah, a little bit. I would never make coats out of dogs, though. I would never.
Thank goodness.
So my first one, let's go. I'll go with the sports one.
Okay.
What do you think an appropriate punishment for Michigan would be?
See, this is tough because sometimes, like, I think I even said yesterday on the show, I'm like, what does a suspension even do for them?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
An appropriate punishment would be to use this season as a way to keep them out of the college football playoff if they end up having one loss to Ohio State. So, like, no matter what, they're not in then.
If they take a loss.
The
it's
CFP
like, is just like,
yep. See ya. No, we have other teams that are that did it the right way and got here. I think the appropriate punishment is to have Michigan fans watch the college football playoff without Michigan in it.
Yeah, I mean, so it's tough because the only punishments that actually would move the needle at all is something to do with being barred from the Big Ten championship game, being barred from the college football playoff, whatever, right? Those would be the ones that actually move the needle at all. Because you're right, suspensions don't really matter. Reduced scholarships, especially with NIL, don't really matter. There's really nothing else. And I don't think that's going to happen, by the way. I don't think they're going to have any in-season penalties in terms of actual games, but I'm not sure anything else actually matters.
How about here's another great punishment. You take their entire team, and for 24 hours straight, without falling asleep, they have to stay awake. If somebody falls asleep, it restarts. They have to watch Michigan losing to Ohio State on repeat.
Coming up next, we got our guy, Brian Edwards, Vegas Insider.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Now, Vegas insider, senior handicapper, and fan of the cold Budweiser bottles, Brian Edwards.
It's got to be touchdown, touchdown, touchdown.
Brian Edwards.
I don't really love it.
Brian Edwards.
Were they using the cream cheese to butter the bagel?
Brian Edwards.
I'm going with the cowgirl.
Here is Brian Edwards.
As we wrap up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio with our guy, Brian Edwards, I want to remind you to go out to Warhorse Sportsbook to place your sports bets in Omaha or Lincoln. That's right. You can go to the casino in Lincoln, or you can go to Horseman's Park in Omaha, 6303 Q Street, to place your sports bets. Whatever major sporting events you can think of, all types of bets. You can visit warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook or get the Warhorse Casino app for details and a full list of house rules. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory.
We met with some of them yesterday.
We did. It was a good time meeting the folks over at Warhorse. Good people over there. Joining us now is another good guy, our friend Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. B, how are you?
Doing great this morning, gentlemen. What's happening?
Oh, just
living the dream,
having a good time on the radio show this morning.
What movie do you think describes his life?
Yeah, B, we were doing some random questions earlier. What movie title would describe your life?
Oh man, that's a good one.
He might be Moneyball. He might
his movie title's Ocean's 11.
Bets and ball games. I don't know.
There we go.
I'm all for it.
We've got a big slate of games this week, B. Let's start off. I know a place you like to start is the SEC. Alabama facing Kentucky. I think you got it at 10.5. I think it might have creeped up a little bit for Alabama. How are you feeling there?
Yeah, and I'm okay with it at minus 11. Maybe a bit of a letdown scenario off the rivalry game and such a big win, that they were gunning for off the open date. But I think they can be flat early, and I'm still confident they'll cover. I mean, since the Texas game, Bama's won 7 in a row, 5 of those wins by 14 points or more. Undefeated in 3 road games, 2-1 against the spread. And when Kentucky stepped up in class this year, they lost 51-13 at Georgia. They lost 38-21 at home to Mizzou. And they did play Tennessee pretty tough, but lose 33-27. Kentucky's only wins over Power 5 opponents have been over Florida in Lexington, at Vandy, and at Mississippi State when Will Rogers was out. So I'm going to lay the points for Bama.
Now, B, I was looking up and down your list, and the BC game actually stood out to me, and it was toward the top against Virginia Tech. You like BC plus 1.5. Boston College has had some really good games this year when they've been pretty competitive, and then they've had some where it's just kind of been But you like the points here at 1.5, huh?
Yeah. I made Boston College a 3.5 point favorite. And look, neither one of these teams is very good, but Boston College, and it hadn't been a murderer's row of a schedule, but they have won 5 in a row, playing with some confidence. They're 11th in the nation in rushing yards, and the Hokies defense is 91 out of 133 FBS teams in run defense. Virginia Tech's lost all 4 road games, 1-3 against the spread, and the only cover was at FSU when they lost by 22. They lost by 7 at Marshall, by 19 at Rutgers, and by 31 at Louisville. Let's go with Boston College to win outright as a 1.5 or 2 point underdog.
B, one of the biggest matchups in terms of brand names, at least, is that USC and Oregon game. Looks like there's some interesting totals on this one. How are you feeling about those?
Yeah, I just want to bet against USC's defense any and every way possible. And we can do that by taking over 73.5 for the game, both teams. We can go Oregon's team total over 44.5. We can go Oregon's team total over 21.5 in the first half. However you want to do it. The Trojans are number 124 nationally in scoring defense. They give up an average of 34.5. In their last 6, they've given up 41, 41 again, 48, 34, 49, and 52. And we know Oregon is dynamic offensively. So however you want to bet Oregon, or just bet against USC's defense by Oregon's team totals, or the over for the game, the over in the first half will probably hit. Or if you want to just put it all into one, go over 73.5 for the game. Whatever you want to do.
B, how high would that over under have to get before you were uncomfortable?
80 or like 82.
So you got some room here.
82 would be uncomfortable, huh? I feel like I'd have to go higher.
Maybe.
We got at least 10 points where you feel comfortable here.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, look, USC has gone over in, I don't have their page in front of me, like every game except for one, and it was just because the other team just couldn't score
at all.
Right, but not because of USC's defense, just the opposing offense is awful.
Right. Now, B, I don't know if this is the second time in 3 weeks, but speaking of overs, you've included your Gators in an over against LSU. Now, LSU, of course, is an over machine, so I'm assuming that's why you made this play. But is this the second time in 3 weeks that Florida's made it into a pick'em for you?
Well, I don't think I had anything on the Florida game last week. What was the week before? Oh, yeah, I had Florida for a loser against Georgia.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I'm just going the over here. By the way, Jaden Daniels, the way I read it and translated it was that he got cleared. He cleared enough concussion protocol to practice yesterday, but I don't know that he's been fully cleared yet. But look, even if he's downgraded and Nussmeier starts, I think he'll light up Florida And by the way, he played pretty good in the fourth quarter. They didn't score any points, but he had some drop balls. He threw some good passes. But look, the over's hitting 5 in a row for Florida. It's hitting 13 in a row for LSU and 16 of LSU's last 17. LSU's defense is awful. Mertz has now a 17-2 TDI&T ratio. I think he can torch LSU's secondary with Ricky Pearsall and Eugene Wilson. So, look, I think we get the over whether Daniels plays or not. But if Daniels gets downgraded, I think the total will go down, 3 or 4 points probably. So maybe you wait it out or go ahead and play it. I don't really care. I think Nussmeier lights up Florida anyway. So give me the over 63.
B, it's weird to say this, but a Big 12 matchup between the Houston Cougars and Cincinnati Bearcats. Houston's a -2.5 point favorite there. You lean in Houston in that one?
Yeah. So Houston's 3-2 straight up, 4-1 against the spread at home. One of the 2 home losses to Texas, 31-24. They outgained Texas 392-360 that game. They had more first downs, 20-19. Since he's lost 7 in a row, last 2 road games, they lose by 32 in Stillwater, by 8 in Provo. They're during the 7-game losing streak, they're 1-6. ATS, Emory Jones during the losing streak, 7 touchdown passes, 8 interceptions. I like Houston -2.5.
I'm looking at, I'm like scrolling through over-unders right now, and I'm looking at the over 83, going back to what B was saying in that Oregon LSU game, and that's plus 250 odds for those out there, according to our Warhorse
If you want
lines.
to buy it up a little bit?
Yeah, if you buy it all the way up.
Alt total?
On the alternate over, if you went up to 83, it would be plus 250. So if people want to really get juicy with an over-under and go with B's logic, that Oregon USC game plus 250. Now, B, let's stick to the Big 12. Kansas -3 against Texas Tech. KU playing really good football.
Yeah, so now this number's 4 at some spots now. There's still a couple 3.5s left. I bought it from 3.5 to 3, but look, Kansas undefeated. I like it at 4 too, by the way. They're undefeated at home, 4-1 ATS. Their wins at home have been by margins of 31, 11, 11 again, 29, and 5. And Texas Tech 1-3, both straight up and ATS on the road. Let's go with KU, hopefully -3, but I'm okay with it at 4 as well.
B, let's get a couple NFL ones in here before we have to let you go. Ravens and Browns. Ravens are 6-point favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I just got to ride the Ravens here. They've won 4 in a row by margins of 34-7, 32 and 8. Their last 2 home wins to get to pretty good opponents, 37-3 over Seattle, 38-6 over Detroit. They also beat Houston 25-9 at home. Cleveland 1-2, both straight up in ATS in 3 road games. And at home, the Browns got trounced by the Ravens 28-3 on October 1st. Give me Lamar Jackson and company.
B, what makes me laugh here is you haven't even seen the number yet on Kyle Pitts' over, but you still like it.
Well, assuming it's not like assuming it's not more than 55, and I can't imagine that it would be. Although we don't know about Drake London. See, Drake London, if he plays, Pitts' yards will probably go down by 5 or 6 yards. But I've hit it 5 in a row. It's kind of a sweat because of Arthur Smith's incompetence. How did he not get fired before lunch on Monday?
No clue. No clue.
We've got one more NFL game for you that you've got that game in Germany, which is always a little bit of a crapshoot. Colts -1.5 over the Pats. How you feeling there?
Yeah, I got to go with the Colts here. But more than anything, we're fading the Pats. They've lost 5 of their last 6, losing by 3, 14, 4, 34, and 35. Colts played all right last week. They win by 14 at Carolina. I like the Colts.
That's our guy, Brian Edwards, Vegas Insider. B, we love talking to you. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks, fellas. Y'all have a good one.
You too. Thanks, B. And I already crafted up my ticket according to B's logic. So I look at the Warhorse Sports app.
Get over there, man. If you want to play some of the bets that B gave us, make sure you head over to Warhorse Sportsbook in Omaha or Lincoln.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Yeah, he's a tough kid, and I think that not a tough kid. He is a tough young man, and I think he does a really nice job of compartmentalizing the noise and all that, and just kind of, he's trying to adopt, Coach Rhule's mindset and our mindset as a coaching staff. Just it's all about us. It's all about coming and controlling what you can control. I know it's a lot of coach talk, but it's all truths. And if you are disciplined enough to do that, then life's a lot better, and you can develop a lot quicker.
It's hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by our good friend Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntz, what's going on, bud?
Hey, how you doing?
We are doing well. So a very important question we have to ask you right off the bat here. It's been a topic of hot debate over the course of the show. We've started devising what we believe to be appropriate punishments for Michigan, and we'd like you to choose the best one so far, okay?
Okay.
All right. Number 1, we've had a suggestion from Ken on YouTube that they remove headsets for 3 games so they get no communication between the coaches in the box and on the field. That's number 1. Number 2, we have a suggestion that they have to play all of the Big Ten's Friday night games. Since they complained the most about it, they have to play all the Friday night games. That's number 2. Number 3, they have to do an extensive book report on Connor Stallion's manifesto, and it will be graded by a neutral university's English professors. If they do not pass, they don't get to play against Ohio State.
And then the last one is a 24-hour watch party of Michigan's losses to either Ohio State, whether it's one game, multiple games, or the TCU game, just their losses. It's 24 hours straight. And if you fall asleep or if one person dozes off, it restarts.
Kind of a Clockwork Orange situation there, Bruntz.
Yeah, you're holding their eyes open. The book report idea, I don't hate. Why do these have to be mutually exclusive? Why can't you use multiple ones?
I mean, we can't.
We can use all four.
You're given the answer here. You mix and match however you feel is appropriate.
Yeah, the headset one's actually kind of interesting to me. I can't remember who came up with that one, but that like if you want like a half season with that kind of competitive disadvantage, like would that cost them games? Like it feels like that would be that would be a significant disadvantage that I would actually that's pretty creative. I like that one.
Yeah, that was Ken from YouTube. Got to give Ken his credit there. Yeah.
Yeah, give Ken some credit there. That's a good one, Ken. That probably doesn't fall in the realistic ones, but that's a pretty creative one. I like that one. The Ohio State one though, that would be that'd be pretty good.
The book report.
That and the book report, like maybe if you wrote the book report and then you followed that with 24 hours of Buckeye highlights.
Just all Buckeye highlights all the time.
Yeah.
Bruntz, as we get to Nebraska stuff here, I guess less fun questions. No, the Nebraska, the game against Maryland obviously is hyper important in terms of trying to get bowl eligible and all of these things. Is it, in your opinion, where does it rank on the likelihood of Nebraska getting a win in their last 3 games? Where does Maryland rank there?
I think high of the 3. I mean, I think if you're just kind of handicapping the 3 games, I mean, you've got a Maryland team coming in that's struggling, which, I mean, sounds pretty similar to last week, but, you know, a team that you have, you know, me in Maryland questioning how dialed in they've been on this losing streak. You know, it is a matchup, though, that it feels like the things that Maryland does well, Nebraska doesn't necessarily do well, and kind of vice versa. So, that's kind of a tough one, but I mean, I don't think, you know, Nebraska's had its demons with Wisconsin for, you know, going on a decade now. I think that's still a pretty tough game, even though, you know, they're obviously struggling in different ways than Nebraska is. And I don't know that you want to go into that home game against Iowa having to win a 10-7 game to get to a bowl game. It's just that seems more fraught with pressure. And you guys know how it is around here. If you drop 2 going into that Iowa game to have to get bowl eligible, I mean, it's going to be, you know, pucker time around here. There's going to be a lot of stress. You're going to feel it in the stadium. The groans are going to be a little bit louder when things don't go right. And so I think you want to avoid that. So I think Maryland is the most likely of the 3. I just, as bad as Iowa is, and their offense is worse than Nebraska's, I don't know that I would trust Nebraska enough with the way that they're currently set up to go in and win that kind of game. It just seems very, very unlikely to me, even though, you know, you got to hide the women and children because it's going to be an ugly game.
Bruntz, do you think it's more likely Nebraska beats Iowa if they've already gotten that 6th win to take some of that pressure off?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it helps. I think this is a team that, I mean, let's face it. I mean, this is still a program that's even though Matt Rhule said this week they've learned how to win. I mean, they haven't. I don't know that they're there yet. And that the type of game that has to be, or that I think it has to be, which is a low mistake field position. You know, it really is. It's kind of, you know, for lack of a better cliche, trench warfare. I mean, you're totally playing the punt and field position game that whole time and hoping you can make a field goal or two, or, somebody screws up and makes a mistake, and you get a special teams or defensive touchdown. I mean, I just don't know that Nebraska's built that way yet. So I think if you're, the pressure's off a little bit, you're kind of playing a house money game against a rival. I think maybe you play a little bit more freely in that game than if you've what would it be, 4 in a row by that point, and then just kind of feeling the weight of everything. Because I've been around here enough, I know how it is, and I think the outside noise on that game would be really tough for a young team learning how to win.
Bruntz, I asked this hypothetical on the show yesterday, and it kind of fits into what you were saying in that first response. That if the Huskers were 5-6 going into that Iowa game, people would be on edge, uneasy, right? But if they lose that game, say they were 5-6 and they lost and finished the season 5-7, is that considered a disappointing season considering the stakes?
Yeah, I would think it would. I mean, everybody, I think most thinking people coming into this season had Nebraska at about a 6-win mark. I mean, I think that's the 5-7 to 7-5 range is where I heard a lot of predictions going into the year. So hypothetically, you finish 5-7, you finish within that range. Okay, I mean, you're a developing program, you're overhauling a lot of things. You've obviously had a lot of injuries. That said, you limped in. You would be limping into the end of a season again, no bowl game, with you kind of had the table set for you. I mean, you needed one more win to get bowl eligible. You played a team without a head coach. You would be playing probably a 6-win Maryland team if that's the way things went. You would be playing a Wisconsin team that's trying to find itself under a first-year head coach with lots of injuries on offense to key guys, and an Iowa team with a lame duck offensive coordinator and a quarterback that's probably even worse than what you've got. So yeah, that would feel a little bit of a letdown going into the end of the season when you're trying to build momentum. So the bar is 6 wins right now. I think you need to get over that. I know Nebraska's made progress in areas this year, but it would feel like you didn't get the job done when it was set up pretty well for you to do so.
Bruntz, I'm curious, do you think that we'll see a quarterback other than Heinrich Haarberg if Haarberg is healthy? Like, do you think there's a scenario in which either no?
No, I don't. I don't. I mean, I don't think that that they never considered a change against Michigan State. I don't get the sense that they're saying there's outward confidence about the 2 backups, and that might be the case, but the way things have acted and been carried out to this point, I would not suggest that. I mean, Jeff Sims coming in for that little burst of action a couple weeks ago did not look like a guy that was ready to take the ball and run with it. Chubba Purdy, I don't know. He's healthy now. I mean, I don't think he's a huge factor there for him right now. I mean, I just don't. Based on what they said this week, I think it's Haarberg, and that's who they're rolling with. And if he's healthy, I think they continue to roll with him. There's been a couple games where you're like, okay, maybe if they threw somebody in there now, they'd get a little bit of a spark or whatever, but they haven't done so. And I think at this point, you kind of roll with what you got. And I think that's Heinrich Haarberg right now, for better or for worse.
Bruntz, there's a lot that needs tinkering, but Michael Bruntz thinks Nebraska needs to start where?
In season or after
in season, right now?
Well, I mean, I think, I think you saw against Michigan State how fine the margin is. If you get a couple big plays in that game and literally 2 or 3 on offense, that game looks a little bit different. I think, that the tinkering needs to be, how do you find 4 big plays on offense during the course of a game, whether that's Heinrich Haarberg doing it with his feet, whether that's, a deep ball to Lloyd or Coleman or something like that. That's one thing you got to find a way to scheme up. The other, I'd like to see a little bit more of the backs. What do you have, like 27 combined carries between Grant and Johnson with a little bit of Josh Fleek sprinkled in there as well. That's fine. But I think, I think the Maryland game is the type of game where, Nebraska should up front be able to get something done with a traditional running game. And I think sometimes they've gotten away from that a little bit quickly. I think sometimes they've gotten away from that when it's been working. I think the first drive of the Michigan State game, or the second half of the Michigan State game, is a good example of that, where you get, 2, 10 yard plus runs, and then, you just don't go back to it. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that. But I think this offense right now is kind of, who they are. And you just got to try to take care of the ball as much as you can, find a couple big plays, and let Emmett Johnson and Anthony Grant work a little bit more. I think that's kind of the recipe going forward.
Bruntz, let's answer the other half of that question. You asked in season or after the season. Let's address the after the season part. Obviously, quarterback's a situation they're probably going to address, but what are your biggest areas of, hey, Nebraska really has to hammer this and get it right in the offseason going into next year based on what we've seen so far?
Quarterback. I think that's the big one. It's the most important position on the field, and I think Nebraska has taken small steps with offensive line. I think, running back, you're probably going to need to add more depth there. They don't have a current running back commit in the class, so you're probably looking portal there. But you got to find a way to get the quarterback position right, whether that's coaching up Haarberg. I think you got to go into the portal and find somebody. I'm not convinced that Nebraska's starting quarterback for next season is on the roster right now. I don't think that's a real hot take, but you're adding Danny Kaler into the mix, which I think he's got a bright future, but you've got to find a way to get a couple of guys in that group that you feel good about rolling into 2024 with. So that's going to be where all eyes are. And the offensive line is kind of going to be an interesting thing because you've got a lot of veterans right now. You're probably going to flip that group somewhat because you kind of have a lot of old guys and a lot of young guys. So how do you kind of bridge that gap? I'll be interested to see how they do that. But it's a simple answer, but quarterback's the biggest to do for this team in the offseason.
Bruntz, if Nebraska had a league average quarterback, how many wins would they have right now?
Well, you a league average.
Well, a different league than the Big Ten West.
I was going to say that's a pretty wide. I don't know if you want to go average there. Do you want to go median? No, I would say. Well, Minnesota. I think Minnesota. You probably win that one. I think you probably have a pretty good case to be made that you beat Michigan State on the road. And that's not. To hang those losses on strictly on the quarterback spot. But let's just say you're able to complete 60% of your passes versus, what they are now, or, a little bit higher level, I think, things look a lot different. And, if you have somebody that with a little bit of ability to run too, I think that would be even better for this offense. So, I think those two, you probably circle those more than others that, you would have had a pretty good shot there to be sitting bowl eligible right now with a little bit better and a little bit more, mainly just more efficiency. If you solve the turnover problems, I think this team would be a lot better off for it because they've got the defense to back that up, and special teams has been at least good enough at times to hold up its end of the bargain too.
Bruntz, Maryland has turned the football over 9 times in the last 4 games. For a defense that doesn't force a lot of turnovers, how important will it be to find ways to exploit those offensive flaws? Because as we know, they put some emphasis on that this week, even hearing from Tony White on Tuesday.
Yeah, well, Michigan State had turned over the ball about as much as Nebraska had done in the last week too. So,
True.
It's not a guarantee that past performances equal results for Nebraska's opponents. They got to get a couple turnovers. I mean, the turnover stat is the biggest for this team. If you can at least keep it close to even, I'm not even talking about winning the turnover battle, but just keeping it at 0, I think would be a big win and probably, results in a win for Nebraska. But I think, from what Tony White said on Tuesday, and I think this is true if you kind of go back and watch that Michigan State game. I mean, the defense was playing on its heels in the first half. They still played well enough to win. They played well enough, but maybe not as well as they had in previous weeks. So I'm expecting a little bit more aggression in the play calls from Tony White. Certainly Maryland's quarterback presents some issues with his ability to run around and keep plays alive. But, you're at home. This is kind of a must win. You're coming off a performance that you felt like wasn't really up to snuff. And even the Purdue game, I mean, I think they kind of felt the same way. So this is a chance to go out and be a little bit more aggressive. And maybe you do force a couple turnovers and get off to a quick start finally. So, the turnover piece of it's going to be big. Like I said, I mean, based on what Tony White said Tuesday, I don't think that they're going to be just sitting back and turning this game into a 7-on-7 matchup. That's not a recipe to beat Maryland, who's pretty darn good through the air.
Yeah, Bruntz, as you kind of watched Nebraska struggle against not a great, and maybe struggles too strong of a word, but have some lapses against not a great Michigan State passing attack. I guess where's your level of confidence in that defense, and particularly the secondary, going into a game against a much better passing team?
Yeah, I think okay. I mean, I think in some ways the skill players on Purdue's roster feels somewhat similar to what Maryland had, or Purdue and Maryland feel kind of similar in that way. I think as much as, you want to focus on the secondary in this game, to me, it's more about what can Nebraska get done up front. I mean, if Hutmacher and Ty Robinson and Cam Linhart and those guys and Jamari Butler and those guys are able to get pressure and win one-on-ones up front, I mean, that's a huge thing. And I didn't think against Michigan State that the defensive line had a great, maybe first 2.5 quarters in that game. I felt like Michigan State was able to kind of control things at the line of scrimmage, even though they weren't running the ball particularly well, but I mean, they protected well enough. So I'll be watching those guys, because on that 3-game win streak that Nebraska had, none of those teams had interior linemen that could handle Hutmacher and what those guys were able to do. So I think that's going to be real important for them to kind of be able to handle things, because where you run into trouble is if you've got, above average skill players, you're having to cover for 5, 6, 7 seconds. I mean, that's a tough recipe. So if those guys up front have a good game, I think Nebraska's defense will be okay. And like I said, I mean, I think Nebraska has to force the issue a little bit more too earlier on if they're not winning those battles. So we'll see how they kind of adjust, but I would expect a little bit more aggression this week.
Bruntz, we heard it from Coach Rhule. Coach White really took on the blame too. What do you think of the ownership this staff took on the loss last weekend, and how that possibly impacts the players from a confidence standpoint this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, players hear that, and I don't know that there's really ever been a time where this coaching staff has said something to the media that they wouldn't say in front of the players. So I'm sure in the locker room there was a lot of that discussion going on. I think they're very honest about kind of film review, and when players aren't doing things right, I think they kind of are willing to, for lack of a better phrase, point the thumb as well if they have to. And so yeah, I mean, I think that there's a little bit of reflection there that Tony White understands what went wrong in that game. He probably played a little bit of a role in it. And, you come back out and try and do a little bit better against Maryland. there's going to be a little bit of pressure on both sides of this game. I mean, Maryland probably sees this as their best opportunity to get to a bowl game too, so they're going to be a little bit more dialed in. But you know, I don't think that I don't think Nebraska's going to have too much trouble bouncing back from the way Michigan State played out. And I think part of that is, you know, this coaching staff's really coaching these guys hard. They have all season, and I think they understand as they get to November, you kind of have to do that a little bit more, and part of that is accepting it when maybe you haven't been up to snuff too.
Bruntz, about 90 seconds left here. I wanted to switch gears real quick. Obviously, you're a Miller North guy, and there was some big news in the Miller North family this week with Coach Fred Petito retiring after 41 years. I know he didn't get his first state title while you were there. He waited until a young, intrepid reporter took over as sports editor from you in around 2002. But wanted to just see if you had any, I guess, thoughts or memories about just covering Coach Petito back in the early 2000s and his time at Miller North.
Yeah, no, I always he was always really generous with his time, more so than he should have been probably with high school journalists and talking through things. And I mean, you have to remember, I was at Miller North from 99 to 2002. And during that time, I mean, they had some good teams, and they, you know, fell short in some pretty disappointing circumstances. I mean, they had the 01 team goes out to North Platte and gets beat by, you know, really upset by North Platte, and a young Danny Woodhead kind of ran wild that day.
Yep.
And I know there was a lot of disappointment on you know, his part, especially after that game, that, you know, they felt like they had a team that was a state title winner. And, you know, he just kind of kept, you know, one foot in front of the other. The offense never changed. And, you know, a lot of great players came through there, in large part because of his coaching and also just the love that he had for that program.
That's Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntz, we appreciate your time. As always, we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Bruntzy.
Coming up next, we've got a little bit more of that Hurrdat hot seat here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
It's 9:30 a.m. here on a Thursday on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
My guy.
We are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. And for hour number 3, we're on KFOR in Lincoln. Before we get to the Hurrdat Hot Seat, I want to tell you about our friends over at Rockbrook Camera. They are not just about selling you a camera. They're about trying to make you a real photographer, whatever that means for your life, whether you're professional or just casually taking pictures with your friends and families and trying to create memories. Rockbrook Camera has you covered, not just at the point of sale, but after the sale as well, with their unlimited support with things like monthly classes to help you learn about your equipment. Go ahead and check out rockbrookcamera.com. You can find them also at 168th and West Sarah in Omaha or 70th and Pioneer in Lincoln. That's a Rockbrook Camera. Gonna hop back into the hot seat here.
Oh, sorry.
It's a little,
My seat was a little warm there.
It is a little warm in here because they opened the door for a minute. They're doing some stuff, and that made the heat kick on. It's like blowing right on us. So we've got a little temperature issue here.
I'd rather be warm than cold.
Ooh, it depends on how warm and how cold.
Well, okay, so
like I'd rather be hot outside in the winter. I don't really like being cold in my house though.
Why is it so warm over there and then it's freezing over here?
I think we're directly under.
It's more of like a bedtime thing, right? Like when you go to sleep,
yeah,
like,
it can't be hot,
cold, right?
Yeah.
And so like having the adjustment, but all together, if it's being cold outside or cold or hot outside, I want it hot outside.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Sure. So that's kind of how I feel inside though. Like I don't want to be chilling here and it's cold. Yeah. Like, maybe in your house, like you have blankets you can throw on another sweatshirt, whatever. But when you're out and about, it's got to be warm for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Outside, I definitely take hot over cold. That was not one of our Hurrdat Hot Seat questions. That's just a random thing that we decided to talk about. Let's jump off here. All right. Since we were talking about me being a nanny earlier, what is the most random job you've ever had?
Oh, good one. I was like a groundskeeper for my neighbor for about 15 minutes. I only did like 4 hours of work, and it was pulling weeds. That's not what I'm going to go with, but that was one where I was just kind of like, well, I was 14. They said like $10 an hour was going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, as a 14-year-old, you're like, yeah, I'll make some money. But then when you actually have to do it, and then your other buddies are playing outside when it's warm, it's just like, I don't want to be here with my trowel trying to dig up weeds. And the task was too mighty for a 14-year-old to take on his own. It wasn't just like basic weeds. Like they wanted me to like get a shovel and scoop out like other parts of landscaping and relay mulch. I'm like, this isn't for me.
It's not worth it.
It's
good gardening word though. Trowel.
Yeah, trowel. Thank you. I could have used the other one, but I don't know how that would go over on sports radio.
Yeah, we're trying to stay on the air here.
Right. Most random job. I was. So this was like a school job in college. I was the recruitment director of the Interfraternity Council.
Okay.
Which sounds very prestigious, but I really only did like a huge chunk of my work.
Yeah.
For 1 week, recruitment week.
Yeah, sure.
But it was a very random job because I got paid for it all throughout the year.
Nice.
But
you basically just worked the 1 week.
Oh, dude, speaking of grounds, I got a great story for you. I met my best friend a freshman year of college working the grounds crew.
Okay.
Or lack thereof, working the grounds crew.
Yeah.
So we would always wake up Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. Like you're asking freshmen in college who like are just now experiencing freedom to wake up this early to go like get their hours in for the week on the grounds crew. Well, so what we would do is like we initially like would take like the buckets that they give us. We would have to pick up trash around campus that early in the morning because that's really all you could do.
Yeah.
Without like, because you don't want to mow, you don't want to wake people up, things like that. Yeah. So they would have us pick up trash. Well, we found out one afternoon that they had us pick up trash because they had too many people working that day. And we just decided to go up to the tennis courts, like way off in the corner and just chill there for 2 hours, like on our phone. We realized like, hey, you're down with this. I'm down with this. This is kind of great.
Yeah.
So then we started doing the wake up early morning. What we would do is we would get our buckets and we would always beg them to put us on old side of campus instead of new. Old side was way far away from the ground. So we would make our walk. We would pick up trash on the way there. But what we would do is go to a place called Grab and Go.
Okay.
We would hide our buckets like behind some dorms and we would eat breakfast for 2 hours. We'd get like donuts and coffee.
Nice.
Then we would go find our buckets again, pick them up and walk back.
Nice.
And that's how we probably got away with half of our hours that one semester. We then realized grounds probably wasn't for us. So we found different jobs, but yes, fair. And then I was in what's it called? Intramural. I was an intramural official.
Oh, okay.
So pretty random. Anyway, it was college. College was really random for me.
Sure. Man, those intramural officials can be rough.
Well, we were pretty chill.
No, I mean, like, it can be rough because no one else is chill.
Oh,
like, the teams are not chill.
Yeah, sure.
It can be rough on the officials.
Well, it was funny because, like, a lot of people would show up with things in their system that probably shouldn't be in their system at the age that they're at. And they would try to, like, argue calls. And I'm an official to this day. So whenever somebody tries to like say something to me, I'm normally snarky back.
Yeah.
Like I had a coach one time here
snarky?
in town. I know, believe it or not.
Shocking.
There was a team from Kansas City that came in and they were hand checking a ton. And I hate hand checks in basketball because you're really you're as a defender, you're allowing yourself to catch up to somebody that beats you.
Yeah, you're
changing
like that. Kind of the flow of the game.
So I'd call fouls. Well, they didn't bring like a really full team that week. And he's like, man, my team's going to foul out by the second quarter. Said, you probably should have thought about that before you came on this trip. And so like, that's like things I say.
Yeah.
And so like, that's how I would treat college students too.
Yeah. Okay. What's your next one?
Did you not have a random job?
Oh, I had a bunch of random jobs. So senior year of high school, my friend paid me to take his sister home from school. He didn't have a last couple hours of school because he had a short schedule. And so he didn't want to come back up to the school and take his sister home. And so he paid me, I don't know, like $20 a week or something to just drive his sister home from school, which was funny because I was probably going to go over to his house and hang out and play video games anyway. So he was basically just like paying me so he didn't have to come back up to the school, which I appreciated because he worked at Target, had a job, and I just made money off of him. So that worked out pretty well. I was a groundskeeper for a couple years at a local kind of baseball complex. out in West Omaha.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
I've always wanted to like take part in something like taking care of a baseball field would be so sick.
It really wasn't bad. We'd drag the infield, we chalked the lines, all that kind of stuff. They were city owned, so they did the mowing, but we did the baseball stuff.
Oh, nice.
So that was pretty cool. I didn't mind that. I've had a lot of random jobs. I'm trying to think what else I've done. I've done like a lot of I worked at the Open Door Mission for a little while.
See, the randomness though is what makes you so well-rounded. And like, that's what I
guess,
but that's what I like tell people all the time. Like, you've done this, you've done that. Well, at some point you're going to work in a career where all of those things kind of come together, where you can take bits and pieces from
like
those experiences.
Yep.
And then merge it into like one Superman in a way. So
I made eyeglasses for a while. I worked at Lens Crafters in the lab. And I literally made eyeglasses.
Gosh, that's too tedious of work for me.
It wasn't bad. It took a little while to learn, but it wasn't bad. I did that for a few years actually in college, kind of after the nanny gig. So that wasn't bad. That's pretty random. That was pretty random.
That's a pretty random one. All right, I got one for you. Big Creighton guy.
Yeah.
I know. Shane, does Ravi like Creighton?
Sometimes
people forget.
When looking at their season, okay. How do I like put this in like a sentence that makes sense? The minimum that Creighton can be that you would also consider a successful season.
Ooh, okay. So I think I need
and like even consider finishing position.
Yeah. So I need single digit losses in the regular season.
Okay.
I think I predicted them at like either 25-6 or 26-5, somewhere in that neighborhood.
So if they were whatever in 9, that's okay.
Keep it under, got to keep it under 10 losses for sure. And then in terms of finishing, I really think they need to make the Sweet 16. Otherwise, I'd be pretty disappointed. Now, I think they can do much better than that.
Right.
But if they got bounced before the Sweet 16,
they got bounced in the round of 32,
I'd be really
that
disappointed.
a disappointed season for them.
Yeah, for sure. With how good I think this team can be, that'd be a really disappointing finish for me.
Well, seeing them play that first game too, and all the pieces working like a tremendous machine,
and how I thought they'd work. Honestly, like it looked a lot how I thought it could. And I get it's just Florida A&M, but you get a little proof of concept on night one. I think less than Sweet 16 would be disappointing.
Speaking of Florida A&M, they take on Nebraska tonight.
They do. It'll be interesting to see what the score is on that one. Obviously, Florida A&M's not great, but we'll see how they do. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Steve Suter. He is the analyst for Maryland football. He played under Coach Friedgen back in the day. He's going to give us a little bit of a preview on the Terrapins coming up next year on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Return is on. Dodges one man. Gets away from him at the 35 on his feet to the 40. To midfield. Look out. Suter will go all the way. 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown. Steve Suter. 74 yards. Gets the quick snap before Maryland can get set. Backpedaling is Suter. Looks up to take it. He'll get it at his own 23. Up to the 30, to the 35, to the 40. Running for the sidelines. The 40, the 45. Midfield. The 45, the 40. Suter down to the 35, the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Steve Suter, 77 yards. Wow.
Wrapping up hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers with me. We're on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We are joined now by Maryland analyst and former player Steve Suter. Steve, how are you this morning?
I'm good, man. You put a smile on my face, that's for sure, with those playbacks.
That's all Shane. That's all our guy Shane there producing. Obviously, listen, you had a nice career at Maryland. It's gotta be good to go back in the time machine and listen to some of those.
Yeah, sure. I did. That's Johnny Holiday, though. Still sounds just like that now, even 20 years later. That's a legend.
Those play-by-play guys tend to have that same voice for the time they're about 20 to 70 there. So, Steve, we appreciate you joining us here to preview Nebraska and Maryland. Obviously, kind of a strange season for Maryland so far. They got off to the great start, 5-0, have hit the skids a little bit since then with 4 straight losses. Is that, in your mind, just a product of the competition changing, or what's happened from the start of the season to now that's led Maryland to where they are?
I think you got to factor that in a little bit with the competition changing, but I think they just have been playing out of character for the last 5 weeks. They mentioned they started off 5-0, and then they went up and played a really good first half at Ohio State, where I thought they were the dominant team for the whole first half. I didn't think Ohio State had them outnumbered in the trenches or overpowered them in the trenches. They were winning the line of scrimmage, and it was looking real positive for everybody that went up there as a Maryland fan and for us in the broadcast. And then the wheels just kind of came off the cart there at the end of the first half and then led into the second half. And then since then, I think they just have had this hangover. They didn't play well against Illinois, and I think they were the better team. Same goes with Northwestern. I think they were the better team there, and they just let that game slip away. it looked like it was going to be a rout. They go up and they score a very easy first drive, about 6 or 7 plays. Everything they wanted to do worked. And then Talia, on their second possession, throws the ball. It slips out of his hands. Northwestern gets the interception on the 10-yard line. And that turned the game on its head, and they've never been able to come out of it. So, yeah, got to be a little bit of competition there. But I just think Maryland has lost their character and their sense of what got them to being 5-0, and they just have not been able to turn it around.
Steve, Maryland, though, still has a strong advantage in scoring offense, pass offense, and total offense opposed to Nebraska. Is this focus, or is the focus, I should say, for the Terps to score and score often against an inconsistent offensive team, or will there be a more strategic way to control the clock against a really good Nebraska defense?
I'm going to go with the first point there. Maryland has not shown all season that they care about controlling the clock, and then for one reason, they can't run the ball. They just can't run the ball. I don't know if you saw the stats against Penn State last week. They were including sack yardage, and we all know sack yardage can be included in total team rushing, but they were at minus 50 yards for the game. The longest run that they had, Hendy's longest run, their starting running back, was 1 yard. And then Littleton, their backup, had his longest carry was 0. So Billy Edwards came in, the backup quarterback, at the end of the game, and he had a little scramble for 4 yards, and he was the team's leading rusher. So they're not a ball control offense, and they're not going to just turn into one. If they try to manufacture their run game with their short passing game and their screen game, you'll see a lot of wide receiver screens probably where they look to get 4 or 5 yards, and I think they think that's an extension of their run game. We were talking in the broadcast last week, just give up on the run. You don't hear people say that, but I didn't want to see them call a run play the rest of the game. And let's just live and die by Talia, drop it back, and see what happens. And that game was really weird as well. As the Penn State, he starts out and he ties the Division I record this season for starting the game 17 for 17, and he could have broke it. The 5-yard pass for number 18 got dropped by Caden Prather, and then you look up the scoreboard and why is it 21-7? And Talia hasn't missed a receiver for the whole game. He's already got 180 yards thrown early in the second quarter. And then you realize, they went for it on 4th down in the first possession. They turned it over on their 50-yard line. And then the second possession, they're driving the ball down the field, and Ty felt one of their receivers fumbled. So just those kind of things, getting in their own way. They have talent, but I know that was a long-winded answer. But no, do not expect Maryland to try and ball control. They want to score as fast as they can, whenever they can.
Steve, it's kind of funny because Nebraska might be the bizarro Maryland in the sense of every time Nebraska drops back to pass, I think everyone in the state is just going, oh God, just please run the ball. And you're the exact opposite. So this could make,
it's a little ironic,
a very strange game in terms of style and tempo. But from what you've seen of Nebraska, you mentioned that pass offense, and Tagovailoa has been super productive again this year. Has there been anything you've seen from Nebraska's defense that you think might be challenging for that Maryland offense?
I think it's going to be up front. Maryland's offensive line was a question mark going into the season, and I think they've continued to be a question mark throughout the year. They did not know, and when I say they, the coaching staff, they didn't know who their starting 5 was going to be. They had 3 departures at the end of last season. A couple went to the NFL, and another guy transferred to LSU, and then what would be starting center, he transferred to TCU. So they had 4 departures that had substantial playing time behind them, and they had to bring in a bunch of transfers to see if they could replace it. Now, Coach Loxley's done that through the portal, but he does it from the FCS level. I've heard him talk about how he likes getting guys that want to come up and prove themselves in the FBS level. Now, that's his philosophy now. I think that might change going down the road because I don't think it's worked. They've not only not known who the starting 5 are going to be at the starting season, but they also didn't know what position each one would play. We've had right tackles playing left guard and left guard playing right guard and right tackles playing left tackle. So it's been a mismatch of players up there, and I don't think they've been able to get the continuity. Penn State really exposed them from a protection standpoint. They do some very exotic blitzing when they blitz from the secondary level, and then they had almost every 3rd down they would just have one, and I'm speaking of Penn State, one D lineman with his hand in the dirt, and the rest of the 5 were standing in 2-point stance. So it was really confusing. Maryland's offensive line, the protection broke down. So that's the matchup I look at almost every game. And so I think Nebraska, if they want to get after Talia, it's going to start up front. And if you can confuse that offensive line that's inexperienced, then you'll have a good shot at doing it.
Steve, Maryland holds a 3-6 record against the spread, enters as a 2-point favorite on the road coming to Nebraska. I haven't been paying too close of attention to Maryland's literal gameplay on the road outside of, just bits and pieces that I see. But their record is still 1-2 away from College Park. And again, we talk about it. They've lost their last 4. Does it surprise you to see a line like that for this team?
You know what? It does. They've been favored in almost every Big Ten game except Penn State and Ohio State. And I think it's accurate because I do think they've been the better team. Let's go back to Illinois. With Michigan State, I think they were better than them on the field, and they ended up getting that win. I think they were the better team against Illinois from a talent perspective, and I feel the same against Northwestern. They have played well on the road. Michigan State was a good game for them, and they started out Northwestern well. The environment there at Northwestern, I'm sure you've been to, that was tough. That was a high school environment. If there was 5,000 fans there, I'd be shocked. So that was one of those, try to get yourself up and get motivated without the environment helping you there. So maybe that played a part in it or not. I don't think that'll be the case in Nebraska. I think they'll be able to use the environment and the amount of fans there yelling to their advantage to at least maybe get their adrenaline pumping, which I think they've had a slow time of as late this season.
Steve, on the defensive side for Maryland, where are some areas that you think can be strengths against Nebraska, and where's an area you have a concern?
I'll start with the area of concern, and that is containing any type of quarterback that can run the ball and move the ball with his feet. They do not do well, the front 4 from Maryland. When they rush and get pressure, they're not very disciplined at where the pressure's coming from and staying in their lanes as far as containing. So they've been burned a lot on third down where quarterbacks have been able to break the pocket and move the chains via their feet. And your quarterback is very athletic in that nature as well. So that poses a very strong concern that they will not be able to contain Harburg from running and scrambling, even when he elects to drop back and pass, and maybe Maryland's secondary is covering the route concept. I still feel Harburg's going to be able to move the ball with his feet and move the chains to extend drives. So that would be frustrating. I really think that defensive coordinator Brian Williams is going to have a steady dose of an extra guy in the box and run man coverage, and just think that his secondary can match up with your outside receivers and they can sustain one-on-one coverage with them throughout the game. You'll probably see that 80% of the time, maybe even more. That's been his philosophy all year. I haven't always agreed with it, but he's been living and dying by bringing pressure and leaving the secondary one-on-one.
Steve,
and then
go ahead.
I'll just throw in a special player if you want to pay attention to a guy. He'll probably get drafted. He's probably a second, third round, maybe fourth at the latest. But Bo Braid, their safety, number 2, Maryland. He's probably their best player on defense and a guy that always catches my eye. So he's one to watch out for.
Steve, I'll make this really short because we got about 30 seconds here. But say you were on the call last week when Nebraska was calling fair catch on every single punt return. How much would that have pained you to see, knowing that you were such a strong special teams guy?
Well, it pains me every time I see Maryland do it. And I will say this is a statistic that's not in the record books anywhere, but I never fair caught one punt my entire career. So that is of all the records I hold, that is my fun fact for sure.
Yeah, and
so it pains me a lot.
And you do hold plenty of them, including a tie for the most punt returns for a single season in NCAA history. Steve, it was terrific talking to you. Hope you enjoy your time in Nebraska and on the call on Saturday. And maybe we'll catch you again down the line.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, thanks, Steve.
That's Steve Suter, analyst for Maryland football, former Maryland football player as well. That's our show for today. Tomorrow, Big Football Friday. Lots coming up here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.